We're going to call the meeting to order at 5:30. Any adjustments to the agenda?
I am going to add one item, but I don't see Stephen Dotson was going to be here for Wyndham Regional Commission potential representative
No.
for the town of Putney.
Okay, well, if he comes, then
We'll plug him in someplace
sounds
under
good.
select board items.
Good. Approval of minutes.
I move that we approve the minutes from November 6th, 2019.
I second that.
Been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of November 6, 2019. If there's no further discussion, then all those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right. Public comment on items not on the agenda.
Can I say something?
Oh, yeah?
Why does that say November 6th?
Oh,
Oh, that's a good point.
yeah.
that over?
November
Good
20th,
catch.
is that what it would be? Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know, who made these minutes up?
I did.
Oh.
Who didn't
Not
read it
these
for?
minutes. Not the-
Where's my
the
backup?
agenda.
But who
Okay, so it was moved and seconded to approve the minutes of November 6th. That was an error, it should have been November 20th.
Right, amend.
Amend to,
Yes.
to approve the minutes of November 20th.
Second,
You
second
second.
that.
If there's no further discussion, all in favor to approve the minutes of November 20th, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. That was unanimous, you got that. Thank you. Public comment on items not on the agenda. Emily?
I just wanted to say that tonight I took a walk between leaving the library and coming here, and I used the new landmark-oriented sidewalk, and it was great.
Good.
Nice.
It's wonderful. Thank you.
Well, as some people no doubt have noticed, we had a glitch with our sidewalk plow, and so if you had tried to do that yesterday, you would have been out of luck, but fortunately,
So I'm paying you
there
guys
you
off.
go. Thank
They look great right now.
you. Yeah.
Thank you for having good timing.
Yes. No, and I did notice on my Kimball Hill is all plowed. There's
Yes.
a couple sections where it's falling off the stone walls into
Yeah,
it, so
yeah.
I need a little cleanup, but no, it looks great. Any other public comment? I don't believe so, okay. So, first item on select board, Sheriff Mark Anderson. That would be you.
That is me.
Good. I'm Josh, Laura, David, Melissa, Karen, everybody else.
I'm Mark. This is Paul Samatero, who's my second in command. So I also want to take this as an opportunity to introduce him to you. If I'm not around for some reason, then Paul's a good person to talk to. So I actually think I've spoken or met with all of you at some
Yes.
point in the last period of time, because I'm not a new face, but I'm in a new role.
Yes.
So I did want to take an opportunity to meet with the select boards, at least say this is who I am and this is what I'm thinking right now, see if there's anything that we can do. I'm also kind of poking and prodding to see what towns need. So for this, there's not really too much of an agenda for me, except for I spoke with Karen. I've spoken with Karen a couple times now. There's, for at least for the next cycle, we're looking at continuing services as you've known them. I personally feel that there's other things that we can do that might provide better law enforcement services to the town of Putney. I also know that animal control has been a bane of many people's existence across Wyndham County. Putney is one of 3 towns that I've had an active conversation with, specifically through Karen, and I don't know that I have the solution right this second. But we have some ideas, and one of those ideas, I'm not sure if you're aware, but based on a conversation with Karen as well as with Russ Hodgkins, who's the town manager for Westminster, there's at least an initial willingness, I will say, on behalf of both the towns to work together to try and conquer some of this together. So I was hopeful through those conversations to speak to the Putney Select Board, see if it's a viable solution to say, how can we join forces with the town of Westminster for law enforcement services in a way to be able to provide animal control services, in a way to provide a better law enforcement service, and try to do it without any significant increase of cost to the town.
That would be great.
So now I need to figure out how to do it. There's a couple ideas. Ultimately, I don't have the ability to do this today, but ultimately what I want to do is create a more regionalized policing service, because at the end of the day, the dog running across the border doesn't care about where the border is, nor does the person who's hurting somebody on two sides of the border or breaking into houses up along Route 5 or wherever they are. So for us to have these kind of rigid walls around each town that we contract with, to me, doesn't make sense. I think that it creates a less than effective law enforcement service. I also know that the state police are spread incredibly thin. With the consolidation of the Westminster, or into the Westminster barracks, they increase their coverage area. So there's troopers who might be up in Cavendish when you say, hey, we had a break-in. It takes time. So what I'd like to see is a more local presence. You know who my deputies are, you know the faces, you know the person to talk to when you're having a problem, but be able to do that in a way that benefits the entire community, as opposed to, okay, well, Putney has a contract for this, but Dummerston is only motor vehicle enforcement, and people don't understand how to access law enforcement services at Exit 4 Sunoco, because at the fire station it worked, but at Sunoco it doesn't. But I need to figure out a way to make it equitable to each town, because ultimately there's a cost for it. Now, talking about animal control, just because of the unique geolocation of Putney and Westminster, and the fact that I have a full-time contract with each town, it makes it viable for us to be able to join forces with these two towns alone and kind of build a microcosm of that idea with the two towns. It doesn't really increase your costs at all, but it takes advantage of splitting the resources of each town with an understanding that, hey, the deputy might be in Westminster, they might be in Putney, but you're getting your 40 hours, Westminster's getting their 40 hours, and life is good. It also allows me to give you, instead of 40 hours a week coverage, it gives you 80 hours a week coverage. It's just dependent on where they're physically located, as opposed to when a call comes in and we say, okay, we're in Westminster, but we're going to Putney. With animal control, it's a tricky wicket for us. The problem that we had many years ago when we were doing it is that every town had a different ordinance. And on a surface level, that doesn't sound overly hard, but we were finding that we had illegal ordinances that we were being asked to enforce because laws had updated and the ordinance had not. We had conflicting ordinances. When I was speaking with Karen, I used the example of the dog running Route 5 between Westminster and Putney. Well, Putney has a leash law, Westminster doesn't. Now I'm trying to explain to one of my deputies that not okay here, and how do we work with that? And then multiply that across all the towns that I have, which makes it a lot harder to explain. The other thing is committing a law enforcement resource, which they require significant amounts of training to be able to maintain a qualified deputy. So committing them to deal with the dog that's running across the town line when somebody had their house broken into. So it becomes an issue of resource allocation, as well as logistics and legal issues, which is ultimately why we got out of it when we did. At the time, Sheriff Clark proposed a model ordinance for the entire county. That wasn't well received, and understandably, because some towns wanted a leash law, some towns didn't. And I think that was actually the biggest area that was tough for people. So it just made sense at the time for us to part ways and say, we can't do it anymore. Over the last 5 years, I think it's been, that's been clearly an issue. Because people try to hire an animal control officer, they last a few months, maybe a couple of years, and then it falls back on the constable, the select board, whoever, and we're back at square one. I don't know the solutions I can provide, though I think I can provide solutions. Whether it's being a call-taking center, we're not dealing with the enforcement side, but we can take the call so you don't have a person getting called at 2 in the morning. I spoke with Karen as well as Russ regarding penalties. One of the things that comes up is the barking dog. We have a dog barking, it's annoying. Okay, most ordinances will say your dog can't, if you have one, your dog can't bark more than 3 sustained minutes. By the time I get a deputy out there, the dog's done barking, I can't prove it, and how do we deal with that now? And generally, the penalties result in fines. So we do issue a fine to a person. We now need to be able to prove it, which also comes with legal responses and consequences, and creates a bigger problem. The other issue is the person is reporting the dog barking when the dog isn't, because they're harassing their neighbor. I mean, really what it comes down to is things like that. So there's these various social level, quality of life issues at hand when it comes to animal control, whether it's a dog ordinance or animals in general. And how do we deal with that? And maybe bringing in organizations that do restorative justice to handle some of those social level issues. We could help be a coordinator of that. I'm a strong believer in restorative justice. So I think it makes a lot of sense getting those things handled at that level and deal with more of the legal issues as a law enforcement side of things. My deputies are all trained in animal cruelty cases, so that's fully a law enforcement investigation. So one thought was we serve as a call reception point. The town has a animal control officer of sorts. And when it's things that are like immediate, like, hey, Sparky's running down the middle of the road in traffic, well, we can commit somebody to go help out with that if the animal control officer is not available. But generally the animal control officer would handle that. Versus we have an issue with neglect of an animal, that somebody left their dogs outside tonight and there's no food, no water, and it's cold. Well, we're talking about a cruelty issue. We'll go handle that and try and resolve the issue as we can. So there's ways that we can do it, I think, and I don't want to present this as, yep, here's the product and please buy it. But I want to open the dialogue and try and join forces with Westminster to put together a solution, because they have a similar issue. And I think both towns are in the midst of revising their animal control ordinances. So it's also kind of a prime time to say, let's bring all those stakeholders to the table and come up with something that works for everyone.
And it's viable.
That would be great. I mean, you mentioned having gone away from the sheriff's department doing much of it under Sheriff Clark, and my recollection is that not to belittle the efforts that were there, but it's never been very functional for us as a town in my 14 years of tenure here. You know, there's always been frustration, and our big frustration, not with you guys because of the lack of ability to provide it, but not with what you do. We've always been very happy when you come and help us. For example, Santa's Land, you know, I mean, when we have a big thing, you guys have definitely been there for us. It's enforcement that's hard for us, and that's a frustrating thing, because without any enforcement, we have no ability to enforce. And that makes our, you know, penalty system and any tickets we're issuing pretty much a moot point, because if nobody's going out there and collecting them, and anybody who watches this or knows the laws in Putney knows that, or the ordinance, we have no enforcement ability. So, you know, I think that's one big part that would be great if you guys could help with that. And I think that's what you're, you know, I think we would be more likely to be able to hang on to an animal control officer if they were not put in a position that really would be better suited to a sheriff or a deputy. Because it makes people very uncomfortable. Understandably, it's not their sort of line of work. And in my experience, I don't think we've ever had an animal control officer that lasted, you know, maybe 9 months at the outside. Often it's financial, but it's also often whoa, I didn't realize what was involved in this,
There's
and I
a
didn't
lot.
realize that, neighbors were so anti each other in this sense, et cetera. And that's complicated for somebody who's not trained to deal with it. So I think that, in my opinion, that would be the area, ideally, that you guys could really help us out with, and it sounds like that's what you're saying as well. So, I hope we can work towards that. And that would alleviate a lot. Also, the call, dispatch essentially would help a lot for somebody in that position to just not feel like they're, the other thing is if we had a good functional relationship with you guys as far as that's concerned, we might in fact be able to get more than one animal control officer and spread it around a little bit. I don't know whether that's possible, but it's just hard to get somebody who stays with it, so.
So the going back to my original desire to provide a more regionalized service across the county, one of the things that I've talked to Karen a long time about is actually having a county-wide animal control officer, because every town except Brattleboro has this problem.
Yeah.
Some towns deal with it better than others for a variety of reasons, but Brattleboro has a full-time animal control officer. If I could have a full-time animal control officer, it would solve so many people's problems, but I need to be able to fund it.
Yeah.
So
And I would just add that, we have always incurred expenses related to an animal control officer, and we're willing to, we don't want to pay a fortune for a service. As you well know, animal control is one of those things that's challenging because we might have 6 calls in a week and we might not have a single call in 6 months. So having somebody full-time-ish in a small town, it just doesn't work at all. I think regional would be great. And I just would say, this is personal opinion, but I think you would find the select board is going to be willing to share in the expenses related to that, because as it is now, we're helpless as far as how we deal with it, and that's very frustrating.
I went to the ordinance enforcement training in Montpelier today that the LCT had scheduled, and I learned quite a bit. And by default, town manager and health officer are the ACO.
Right.
Okay? So in order, if we have civil citations that we're writing, you as a select board have to designate those people. Now, not only do we have animals, but we have zoning, and all motor vehicles are handled by the sheriff's department by law.
Right.
So those we don't worry about. So like your speeding and your parking and, snowmobiles, ATVs, that's all the sheriff's department, which is good. But to have somebody write a ticket for ACO, they would have to have proof to go to court. So pictures, witnesses.
Right.
And the judicial system right now is, they have 20,000
So
tickets
text, yeah.
a year. And they like the simple ones, which are the speeding tickets. So the way they explained it to the group today is zoning and animals are thorny, which they mean complicated, because they have to have the ordinance in front of them, and they decide that day. And of course, if the person that got the ticket doesn't show up, so the municipality
Right.
is awarded, but the judge can also, so if the ticket's $5,000, that judge can say, no, we're gonna, $100 for that ticket. So you do all that work, and if you're not trained and do it right, then, you have to have somebody certified to know what they're dealing with and what to look for, and to be prepared to go to court.
And neither you or Tom, in the role of our health officer, has the time, ability, training to
No.
do.
No.
That's just not appropriate.
Right.
We can't ask you to be doing that, and I understand that by default
Yeah.
it falls to you,
Right.
but we can't ask you to do, that's,
Right.
That
that's
was my concern
not
when I read
appropriate.
it.
Right.
Yeah.
So I like Sheriff Anderson's idea
Absolutely.
about a shared
Yeah.
ACO.
Do you have a feeling of the communities that you serve, their willingness to be part of that kind of program?
I know of 3 right now. I have spoken with So Westminster, Putney, and the town of Wyndham are 3 communities that have actively said, this is a problem that we need help with. Part of the reason I haven't had that conversation in other communities is because those were the last 3 towns I spoke to when I started hearing it's a problem. But just ancillarily, I've heard from other towns like squabbles, like, yep, we lost our ACO, yep, so-and-so quit. And it's been a revolving door. Every town's dealing with it.
And how many communities do you serve?
That's a hard question to answer because I'm going to say roughly 13. With that being said, the regionalized animal control officer wouldn't require those towns necessarily to be involved. And really, I'd like to approach all 23 towns in Windham County.
So basically, if a majority of them were interested, would make it much more viable to fund a program.
Correct.
Exactly. But you don't really have any ideas of what it would cost to do that yet. We're all in the beginning of this.
Yes, we're at the beginning because we also have to determine what that position looks like. Because if I say, hey, everybody, all 23 towns are on board with an animal control officer, that sounds great. There's also 23 opinions of what the animal control officer does,
Right.
and I have to look out for the liability of my agency.
Right.
So I consider my opinion more important, which when you're funding it, that doesn't matter. So that's why I want to bring people together, get the stakeholders together to say, let's put everybody's issues on the table and then figure out a program that works.
And I'm curious, 23 towns in that area to cover 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, would one officer actually be enough?
I can't tell you call one. We have no data on it.
Yeah. So our last animal control officer shared some of the calls that he was getting with me, and it was actually a little overwhelming how many he was getting, and a lot of them were nuisance calls. I hesitate to use that word, but they were calls that really shouldn't be going to an animal control officer. Right. They were calls he could not service. I think what I really like about you having dispatch do this is that it would alleviate that stress.
A certain level
from
of triage.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
And our dispatchers are trained on being able to
Exactly.
process through it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the dog's barking. It's going to be quiet in a minute.
Yeah.
I mean, they're dogs.
Or not.
Because
But also when the
almost
dog-
every single time our deputy gets there, the dog wasn't barking.
Right.
Whether they were or not, I mean, we can't control that. We have more phones now, so I mean, somebody might be able to record and give us that evidence. That's a difference between now and 2010. But evidence is a big piece of it, and something like a barking dog, when the judges or the hearing officer is considering a violation of the town's ordinance and they're seeing it for the first time, as Karen mentioned, and they're saying, okay, well, it's barking for 3 minutes, prove it. Crickets, Your Honor, I'm sorry. Then we lose it, which means we've invested probably about 4 to 6 hours of time just in this one case about a dog barking for maybe a $25 penalty.
But if so, there was someone there who responded, and the person that owned that dog, or someone else who owned a dog that was barking, knows there's going to be someone that responded, and maybe that inspires them to be more responsible. And even if you have an animal control officer who is too busy, some of the times there's going to be times he's not doing anything either. There needs to be someone doing it.
Yeah.
So I think it's an important thing.
So we have this conversation more about traffic safety, but it's almost pretty much the same paradigm. It's the 3 E's of traffic safety: engineering, education, enforcement. You have to have all 3. So you want to build a road. If it slopes off to the side, cars are going to tumble down the mountain. So it makes sense to engineer it correctly. You need to educate people. We have driver's education. We do public safety announcements like, hey, go slow when it's slippery out, because we have people who have never driven in the snow here. So there's constant recurring education. And then enforcement, because, well, yeah, we know that the road's built right, and we know that we're not supposed to go 100 miles an hour on Route 5, but nobody's going to stop me. Then nobody's going to stop me, and they're going to do it. Actually, after Irene, because so many law enforcement resources were committed to basically infrastructure protection, we found the average speed on most 50-mile-an-hour roads was close to 75 miles an hour. Normally, expect it closer to about 56 to 58. So it took us about 6 months to get that under control. When you lose enforcement, it takes about a month to lose it,
Right.
and it'll be madness. And animal control is a perfect area where it's madness.
No, and of course, the other reality with animal control is that I think the education component is huge to it. But, it's the repeat offenders that the
Right.
enforcement is gonna be a big, not unlike speeding or anything else. Most of us are trying to do the right thing by licensing our dogs and stopping them when they're barking forever, et cetera. It's the ones, those are the
Right.
tricky ones, and I think that's where, again, with the animal control officer,
Yeah.
they're just challenged by people who say, what are you gonna do about it,
And,
it's like,
I have that right now.
Yeah, it's a
I-
problem.
Yeah,
It's tough.
and, somebody has said, well, the town's not gonna do anything about it, so there's no consequences.
Exactly.
Because we don't have the enforcement. And, we're not in this to make revenue, but the education piece is what's lacking. And
Yeah.
that's what we have to work on,
Yeah,
because it's prevention, compliance, health and safety. That's what we have to be looking at.
Which is another reason to go into the revenue. That's why I really think the restorative justice model makes the most sense. It really says these are people who care.
Right.
Similar, is everybody familiar with Youth Services Diversion Board? So you bring in members from the community, and let's say we had 23 towns, well, hey, each town designates a representative, just like the Mayor of Cole. So you have 23 representatives saying, that's annoying, and we don't like that.
Right.
And it upsets me when I have a child at 2 a.m. trying to sleep and your dog's running around in the backyard barking at every squirrel that ran by. So I think that the restorative justice model can put a face on a problem as opposed to it's just the neighbor that I've had a dispute with ever since I've moved here.
Right.
No, it's not the neighbor, it's your dog.
right.
Or it's your cat, or whatever it is.
Right.
So,
So it's the level of tolerance that is the question, for Putney.
Yeah. No, and yeah, there's no easy solution, obviously. But again, I think we understand
Yes, we do.
that we need to be supportive of a process if we want it to be functional for us. And again, not that we want to write giant checks, but I think, whatever we can do,
Yeah.
we're willing and able to do. I also, just a couple other comments from my part on overall. I think that one thing that's frustrating for us as far as policing is concerned is the lack of stability in who our deputy is. And that right now, Chris has been with us for a
Yes.
while, so that
Yeah.
hasn't been, but over time, and I'm not pointing fingers, I'm not blaming, I'm just expressing that that's one thing that makes community policing tough for us is when we have to shift. And I know you're aware of that, and I know that's something that I'm sure is on your mind, and I know that trying to find people for those roles is tough, so.
yes.
But that more sort of community policing model is definitely our preference as much as possible, obviously. I
So,
can't speak for myself, but I think speaking for all of us.
yeah, I fully agree. So there's a few different reasons why different faces will move. And kind of like buying a house, there's seller markets and buyer markets. Well, there's employer markets and employee markets, and it's a huge employee market for law enforcement. There's an agency that's offering several thousands of dollars as a sign-on bonus to come work for them.
Right.
And my deputy hears that and says, I want to buy a new truck.
Right.
Well, that's encouraging, and I'm trying to keep costs down, so I'm not trying to say I'm going to do the same thing too, because I'm going to run out of people or run out of money, and I'm going to run out of contracts. So there's a recruiting is a piece of this, and it's not only it's a problem for my agency, it's a problem statewide. Talking to the state police commander, he's already down, I think it's 2 per shift. Nationwide, it's an issue. The good news is I think we're seeing an uptick. And I've also had a lot of interest in my agency. That's been somewhat unique in the last 3 years. We used to get somewhere around 200 applications a year. It went down to about 5, and 2 of them or 3 of them were felons. So I can't hire a felon. I just can't. And it became hard to recruit through that. We're trying new things. We've started taking advantage of Indeed to post jobs on there, and we've had several applicants recently. Whether they're qualified or not, I don't know. But then training's another issue because I need to get them to the academy, but because everybody in the state's having this problem, they're canceling academy classes. So that's my problem, but you feel the effects of it. And so controlling that as best we can is an objective of mine, but it's also kind of a mutual understanding that I can't control if somebody's going to get hired somewhere else. I just can't.
Yeah.
So it's part of the reason so I'm a huge proponent of community policing. Long time been involved in it. We've integrated well with all the elementary schools and the high schools in the region to try and have a strong presence there that's on a positive as opposed to a negative purpose. So we've seen a lot of really good things in the community policing sense. One of the hard things that we struggled with was what we initially sold as the resident deputy program. Person who lives in your town, they're going to be your police officer. The problem with that, I can't control where somebody lives without buying them their house, so I'm not doing that because of the same problem as money. I can't control where their lives will take them. Hey, I got married, I'm moving to this town with my new spouse. And the third part I can't control is I might have someone who's really good at stopping cars and really bad at chasing dogs.
Yeah.
And you have a dog problem and they're working in Putney. Well, that's not going to work for you, but I don't have an infinite number of places I can move my personnel around to. So my goal and my objective is to look at the skill set of a deputy and try to apply them based on the community that needs it. But then they get hired by somewhere else and, well, I need to cover my contract because that's just business. So then what? So part of my goal with providing a greater regionalized service is to provide more stability to my agency so that if I do have someone get recruited away, well, I still have 3 other people with the skill set that really fits Putney.
Yeah.
Not just one. So while the mentality and the goal of the resident deputy program, I think held a lot of ideals that were positive. Realizing them came with some unforeseen problems that we just can't mitigate enough to make it possible. Without making some adjustments. So my goal is to try and have at least the same people on the day shift and the same people on the night shift. So instead of seeing one person, you see probably the same 2 people. And Vermont is very well separated by its watersheds. So it's interesting to see the different personalities, the West River Valley versus the Connecticut River Valley. Just how towns interact is different. Though the town of Putney and the town of Newfane select board halls are very similar, the conversations that occur in them are not. Other than animal control that happened in Newfane. So by having my law enforcement coverage be delineated by the watersheds, it also makes sense because they understand each valley's mindset, their approach, and values, as opposed to Putney versus Whitingham, who has an entirely different set of values, and none of them are wrong.
Yeah.
They're just different.
Yeah.
So I think it makes sense to try and concentrate resources by that, and I'd like to build that, but that's probably about a 10-year plan, and we're talking about the next year.
Right.
Well, I think, regionals around, we're certainly, that's a discussion we have all the time about everything, so I think that's the reality we're looking at. But
And the things I'm talking about right now, this actually is not a new conversation. We've talked about it in the legislature. It's been discussed, I think, since the 1960s, almost coming up every legislative cycle. Everybody looks at it and says, yep, it's broken, let's fix it, but we can't find the solution. It's complex. But regionalized policing is one of the things that will be part of this next legislative session. Regionalized dispatching is going to be a part of it, which I have a regionalized dispatch center, so it makes sense for me to start providing those services to more of the communities. Animal control, I'm sure, is an issue. I'm not sure if it's a legislative issue, but I think it makes sense to mix it into regionalized policing. And if we can fill that enforcement side of things, I think that that makes a lot of sense, as long as it's done in a way that mitigates the liabilities that I have to face while enforcing the town's law that ultimately allows for the values of Putney to work, whereas they're different in Newfane. So, based on at least the openness to it, I think what I'll do is coordinate with Karen and Russ to maybe set up initial conversation, see who needs to get invited. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, and I think, I mean, just one comment on that legislative aspect of it is just the fact that, as you pointed out, each of the 23 towns having a different ordinance, some statutory language that would help us from a legislative perspective as far as animal control is concerned would be welcome. And we have certainly voiced that multiple times to our representatives. I understand how hard it is to make that happen, but I think that is one role the legislature could play, and this is a little bit more tooth behind the statutory language on animal control. Could be helpful. But. Good.
Excellent.
Any more questions?
A lot of information, lot to think about.
Yeah, you talked a lot about values and I appreciate that, thank you. Something that has come to me repeatedly and something that I think about a lot is your fair and impartial policing policy.
Yes.
And I'm curious if you've looked into the Winooski standard and if you have considered adopting it.
So I've met with a couple organizations, which I think you're familiar with that, because I think we were talking at one point about the fair and impartial policing policy.
You and I have never actually made contact on that. We made contact on a few other issues regarding homelessness and the opioid epidemic, but
I thought at one point we talked via email, but
maybe.
it doesn't matter.
Okay.
So I think within the first month I was in office, I met with a group of various people, several of which I believe were from Putney and Dummerston, regarding the fair and impartial policing policy. We do have a policy that's been approved by the Attorney General's office. It fits the model policy established by the Criminal Justice Training Council, and it comes with concerns from people within the community about what it could allow. So after that conversation with the group, we discussed talking again in the future. As of this point, that hasn't happened, but I don't think that that's because anybody's not considering it, but rather just things are busy right now. A representative from that group, I forget her name, but it's in my email still, sent me some recommendations for improvements, which I need to go over with my legal counsel regarding those specific things and what effects they could potentially have to ensure I remain in compliance with state and federal law. And I've also discussed with a couple different just random members of the public that I've talked to about their opinions of it, but I haven't been able to commit the time to deal with it because, like you, I'm in budgeting season and town report season and statistics season. So as we get past December into January, that's where I suspect until about town meeting, I'll have the most time to be able to spend to really focus on it, because it's a significant concern. The Winooski policy, I have at least initial concerns about. I spoke with the chief of police from Winooski, forget his name, and he was sharing with me some of the effects that it had on his agency, including funds being withheld from them. When I discussed that with the group of people that I met, they said that didn't happen, and I don't know, I wasn't there. So it does cause me concern because I get a lot of money from federal funding. And to lose that also means that I can't provide services to the town of Putney for free. So I can't lose federal funding. Some of the changes, while I don't think I can accept them exactly as written, I think that they're like the 90% solution, and so with a little massaging, we can make it work. But the other thing, just in reflecting on some of those changes, what was interesting is I started looking at some of the various instances that have happened around the state of Vermont, my agency really doesn't deal with any of them. I shouldn't say deal with them. We aren't having the same interactions. In fact, looking at our race data that we submit to the state annually, we show very low indications of stops of minorities or people of lower, I'm losing my words, socioeconomic needs, thank you, or means. So I've been very grateful for my staff in that we're not seeing groups targeted based on their race. Can that change? Absolutely. And we focus on fair and impartial policing training each year. It's been a focus of ours for over a decade. Even before it was a legislative requirement, we were doing it. So I think that has paid off in terms of ensuring that we're not causing an issue or treating various races or genders or sexes or whatever improperly. But I also need to always be cautious and knock on wood on my way out that I can have a deputy who decides to conduct themselves outside of our values, and that's not okay, and my policies need to take that into account. So.
And the changing demographics as well. I
Yes.
think that we're going to see that continue.
I agree.
All right, well, I appreciate you being open to changing that, and I hope you continue those conversations.
And if anybody ever wants to be a part of that conversation, I'm always open to it. I can't promise I'm going to do everything that everybody wants, but my goal is to ensure that we're doing it the best way that we can, and I want to be open to what people think about it. So if you're aware of people who want to discuss it,
We do have, yeah.
send them my way.
We have a committee, Equity and Inclusion Committee.
I would love to be an agenda item for their meeting.
They meet tomorrow night.
There you
I
go.
won't be here tomorrow night.
Their agenda's already done anyway, but I will definitely put them in touch with you. So, fantastic, thank you.
Thank
That'd be
you.
good. No, and just one thing that occurs to me also that's been part of our discussion, and you might have more ability to be more flexible with this, is but just hiring policies. You know, and I'm sure your hiring policies meet all the statutory language that they need to, but being, you know, who to reach out to in order to be more equitable in your hiring process might be valuable over time to you as well. And I'm assuming you already had that on your radar, but.
Yeah, so I'm hiring, and I would really love, I have a lot of white men who work for me. I have one female deputy.
Okay.
I have I believe 2 people that don't fit the Caucasian checkbox, so to speak, and I don't want to talk about them as checkboxes, but that's it. And we do have an increase, and every time I try to recruit somebody, they find a job for about $80,000 somewhere, and see you later. So I've struggled with that, and I know that I certainly have a significant unbalance in terms of the makeup of my agency. So if you know anybody who's interested in policing, that's community oriented, I'm looking for those types of people. I have sworn staff, I have unsworn staff, but it's been tough.
Are you working through the high school to try and recruit while they're young?
Yes. So more specifically the Career Center, they have a criminal justice program, and so we've supported that program for about 30 years, up until about, I think it was 4 or 5 years ago when a sergeant from Montague PD took over as the full-time instructor. I shouldn't say full-time, but actually an employee of the school. The sheriff's office committed the instructors for that. And so once he took over, what we did is we committed guest instructors because it allowed us to be able to come in, be seen, have conversations and dialogue. And I've hired several people out of that program. So we are trying to work through that. And then unrelated, I was a school resource officer at the high school, so I was constantly trying to recruit people when they're like, well, I don't know what I want to do with my life, and I'd be like, come work for me. But so far that didn't pan out.
We just, we just teamed up today with Leland and Gray in Bellows Falls also. So we have at least 3 kids are going on ride-alongs in 2 weeks, and then I think we have a group of maybe 6 more that are interested. So we're going to try to recruit from the community. So we'll get them out there and see if they like it, and if they do, we'll continue the process through.
Good. Got anything else? Good.
That covers it for me.
Anybody in the audience have any questions or? Oh, good. Great, thank you both so
Thank you,
much.
gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Can we do Stephen Dotson?
Yes,
Because that'll be fairly,
quick.
yes.
Okay.
Mr. Dotson.
Hi.
Thank you for waiting.
I'm Stephen Dotson. I used to live in Westminster in West, and I served as Westminster's rep to the Wyndham Regional Commission. Karen was actually there when I stumbled into town hall and looked for something to volunteer for, and there had been an open slot at the WRC for a while, so I just kind of ended up there. But I've really enjoyed that work. Now, having moved to Putney, I don't know that it's appropriate for me to continue working for Westminster. I'm living right across the street here at 94 Main Street. I'd like to continue the work I'm doing. I've gotten to know Karen a little bit through doing it. I'm on the Energy Committee with the Wyndham Regional Commission and also the Community Development Committee. And my own background has to do with environmental nonprofit stuff. I've worked with the Rich Earth Institute and other renewable energy people around town and this kind of stuff. So I noticed you all have one absent slot in the WRC. Karen is one of 2 appointees that your town has, this town has. And so you're underrepresented currently. And so I saw it as a chance maybe to give Putney more of a voice, to continue some of the work I've already been doing. And I've already talked to Westminster. They're prepared to find somebody else to replace me. So it's not as though the WRC is losing anyone, or in fact, I think that it would be in a position to gain a commissioner is the goal. So really, I'm trying to continue doing what I've been doing, just do it with you all in mind, and try and get to know the needs of this community a little bit more. Not too far away, not too distant. I've kept a little bit of a tab on Putney, but there's a lot more to learn still if I'm going to do this the way I want to do it. But I thought I would come before you and ask if you would consider appointing me.
I recommend the appointment. He would be an asset to Putney as a representative.
Good.
Great.
He's on my
Until he
team.
signs something to paper, right? The one thing we usually ask just as a formality is something in writing. And I don't know whether you've already gotten that, but I mean, I'm not adverse to an appointment based on the assumption that you would, I mean, really simple, I'm interested in this role.
Yeah,
You
it
know.
can be in an email too, Stephen.
Yeah, you sign here, we'll fill it in.
Just leave the check blank.
And there is a form, Wyndham Regional, I'll have it for the next meeting. I didn't have it tonight. So, and you'll have to sign off on it for the appointment,
Right,
okay?
yep.
So I'll be sure to get you something in writing before
Yes.
then, so that everything's in line.
That'd be great.
Yeah. Paper trail.
Great, and I will, as I've done with Westminster, I'll come and report to you at least once or twice a year on what I've been up to, and just ask if there's anything you would like us to keep in mind as we go through that work.
Yeah.
Yep.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Good, thank you very much.
Yeah, have a good night.
You too.
All right. Meg,
Yeah,
Hi Meg, thank you for
Hi.
coming.
yes,
It's been a while.
it has been a while. I think since last probably January. We were a little later last year.
Yes.
Yeah.
and I don't think we're necessarily doing exactly the same thing. I mean, there was a context in which you were asking Meg to come in.
Yeah, I had asked Meg to reach out to the school board regarding town meeting.
Right.
Because
Oh, that's right,
there's
'cause they're,
different dates.
yeah,
So the town will be having their town meeting on March 3rd.
There, yeah.
And then the school board is having theirs 2 weeks later.
And so I reached out to Ann Beekman,
Yeah.
just to say, you know, what's happening, and do they even want me to moderate, because that's another question.
Can I ask a point of clarification before you get further? This is the new district-wide, the new district school board. It's not
Correct.
anything to do specifically, well, obviously, it's something to do specifically with Putney Central, but it's the whole,
It's the whole thing.
it's the,
Yeah.
okay, good, sorry.
The
Yeah.
consolidation.
Yeah,
So I don't have any more information because she didn't know.
Oh.
So I don't have anything in detail about the school board and whether they even want a moderator. So I'm here tonight, maybe, I don't know, it was just a heads up on any information you want to give me about articles for the town meeting, but,
I haven't started articles yet.
mm,
I will be in the next few weeks.
okay.
Um,
Yeah.
Because our next regular meeting for select board is the 18th of December.
Mhm.
So I want to have a draft. But I'm not going to have everything because
Right,
the budget won't be approved by then.
yeah.
So we are at a sticky point here because
sorry.
we need to talk to the school to make sure we have a venue for town meeting. Because I
Right.
suspect that we're going to have at least, you know, a couple hundred people. The other question is whether or not, at this point, it doesn't appear that we will have the school board's information to compile with our town report. So it appears that we're gonna have separate town reports. And
Would it be a town report or would it be a school report? Would it be completely separate from anything we do?
Yeah, the school board will do
Their own report?
their own report, and it'll be separate from the
Yeah.
town portion.
Which sort of functionally, that's been true in the past, but they've both been in
Binded,
one. I mean,
yes. Yeah,
we don't overlap at all jurisdictionally.
no.
It's just that it was combined in one, so.
Now, the town articles, there's a question too, because the school board does have certain articles that go into the warning along with the town's articles.
Into our warning?
Yes, yep. So they have Australian
There-
ballot
there-
votes,
there-
right?
There will, oh, okay.
Right,
For members of the school board.
yeah. So the
Yeah.
question is, when we do the Australian ballot for elections, is it gonna be on one ballot on March the 3rd? Or are there gonna be two separate ballots? These are questions that we need to start answering.
I would certainly recommend one ballot. I mean, we'll get better turnout.
Right, and that's the other thing,
which is-
Josh.
Which is important.
Yeah, because the school board usually, a lot of people come out for that particular discussion.
Totally anecdotally, but I'm often surprised by how few people are there specifically for the school board portion. And I know there are people, but my general sense would be in the town of Putney anyway, that more often people are more focused on town issues. That may be completely inaccurate.
Well, I did notice
I don't know how it would play
this
out.
past town meeting, after the school board was done, a lot of people got up and left.
Yeah,
And I'm like, but there was an article
The-
that was
yes,
controversial, so.
yeah.
Based on the high school turnout, when when the high school has their annual meeting and their vote, it's really like, Putney's a handful of
Right.
people that show up.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, no, and I think that, that is something that is an unfortunate reality of the combined district, is that less people
Right.
will be participating in that. But again,
Yeah.
totally anecdotally, I think, I'm amazed how often we pass the school budget with few or
26 people.
almost no
Yeah.
questions
Right,
asked,
right.
I mean, that just, I don't know why that happens, but that's my
Yeah.
experience, is the school discussions are much more limited in my
Yeah.
experience.
So there are some logistics that need to be worked through, because I don't want to get to town meeting on March 3rd.
Yeah.
And people are asking, well, where's the school
Right.
budget? And where's this or where's that? Why aren't we doing this together? So there is a change, but I don't know how to approach that change yet, because we don't have answers.
Right.
And that was part of Meg's research, to reach out to Ann.
And so you don't, I mean, presumably they will have to have a moderator, but it may well end up not being you. I
Well,
don't
if
know
it's-
how they,
If it's a regional meeting,
right,
and so it's many different towns, then it wouldn't
Right.
necessarily be
exactly.
Putney
Who
town
would, yeah,
moderator.
no, I don't know how they do that.
And I know there was some question for a while, this predates Act 46, but that for the ballot last year, did it say town moderator and school board moderator? Usually it just says town moderator.
I think it just said town moderator, but
Right, and the Vermont cities and towns, when I first,
I
was,
recommend,
they say, well, you should actually run for both.
Right.
Rather than just assume that your town moderator, you're gonna be school board moderator.
I thought both of them were on that ballot.
it might have been, but
I
that
think
would
the last
be, you,
time-
that would have been something
Right.
you
The last time we
probably,
did
Yeah.
it, but this time, this is gonna be a question of.
Right,
right.
right.
Well, and it's not a Putney specific question, so I would
Right.
assume in the future, and well, presumably this year, there will be a race for moderator of school board, but not specific to Putney. So, I guess that would be a question for you if you're interested in that, and if so,
Yeah.
how to get on that ballot. I don't know
Right.
who does those school-related ballots.
And Anne, I can reach out to her again. Is there anybody else that you recommend that I should just?
Christina Miller, she's the
She's
chair.
the chair. There may also be statutory language related to it in Act 46, I don't know. I'm not sure, I'm not familiar with there being, but somebody
don't
must have thought
remember.
about it. I don't know, yeah.
I don't remember anything like that, but there may have been, I'm just not recalling it. The first time that they met and passed a budget, I believe the moderator was appointed by them. So,
Yeah.
but I'm not sure.
If I send you an email, can you send me Christine numbers? And I'll just keep going with this. I certainly don't feel like I need to moderate, but I do want to just, I think we
Right.
all want to know
Yes.
how we're going to run the
Yeah.
March 3rd meeting, and can we still use the school even if the school board isn't part of that? Because it's also Super Tuesday. It's a big day,
Oh, yeah.
March 3rd.
Right. That's a big action.
Yeah, I mean, again, I would, it would certainly be my preference that if there are Australian bound, that the economics of it also, I mean,
Right.
for us to run a separate election is expensive.
Yes,
So,
yeah.
we certainly would prefer that, but again, as far as turnout is concerned, we'd do better also, especially as you
Right.
say, on Tuesday, that presumably will motivate some.
Has Jonathan been exploring this at all?
A little bit, but he hasn't, like Meg, doesn't have any answers. So,
And I don't feel like anybody's keeping things from
No.
us. I think
Right.
they're trying to figure
I'm
it out.
not sure, yeah, no, I'm not
They're
sure.
making it up
who-
as they go along.
not sure
I mean,
who would
we
have
know
those
what we
answers.
want to do,
Right.
Yeah,
but we can't wait
no,
long for the
no,
school
it's a good point.
to decide what they're gonna do.
For just generating the town report and mailing the town
Right.
report.
Right.
Well, we're not waiting on that for the town report. The only thing we would be waiting for that would be if there are gonna be names on an Australian ballot, then those should be in the town report. But other than that, the school is just not in the
Yeah.
town report
Okay.
any longer.
And
So,
I think petitions are due by the 27th of January. And we have a meeting on January 29th, so we can finalize the warning
right,
for town meeting
on the 29th.
and the budget. And the budget, I think we'll have done before then anyway.
Hope so.
Okay.
I mean,
No, we will. I'm
for
confident,
for our own well-being, I hope so.
I'm confident of that, Josh.
Yes. All right.
Okay.
So I'll
We'll be in
touch base
Yeah.
with you, Meg, and just, we'll keep that conversation going.
Yeah.
And I think that you should loop Jonathan in just because
Right.
you know, again, there must be state-related stuff, just because
Right.
it's, that we're not, this isn't unique to us, so how that fits together, I don't know.
Right.
All
I
right.
will email you.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Meg, for coming in.
Yeah, always nice to see you all.
Yes.
See you too, thank you. All right, library draft budget discussion.
Good to see you guys.
Hi, Emily.
Thank you for coming.
Yes, I know you guys had this budget in your packet, but I gave you a new one that is double-sided because I noticed, or actually Meredith noticed, that there was an error in the percentages. Nothing with amounts or the bottom line. When I reformatted it, I messed it up a little bit. So it, the one that's double-sided with the pink all the way on the right is the one we're looking at. Yeah. And Laura, did you remember what question you had, or should we just
Well,
go?
I'm curious, let's see, where was it? The endowment interest, you didn't, is that just hasn't paid out yet, and that's why
For a
it's
while.
zero?
For a while, the endowment was sitting in a checking account, and then it was in a CD for part of that year, but it's true, I think we failed to make that transfer when we met at the end of last fiscal year to make the transfers. I know that we also, Karen, had that other transfer to address, and I also noticed that while I was putting this together, but just didn't, it's true, we didn't transfer anything for it. Maybe we could look at what the CD made and retroactively make that transfer, because we did have an overage in our spending last year.
And so what are you asking about that, Laura? Because it's on here, it's listed.
They didn't actually.
In 20, oh, you were talking about in the actual in
I see,
2019,
I see.
yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Which is a good question, and I noticed it as well, so, it's
You're
true.
looking at me.
I know, I'm looking at you like, maybe we should be with Karen and, and check, but the CD did make something, more, I don't think it was $3,000, but it did make something that is now
Yeah, it
in part of the endowment.
Yeah.
And we should, we did budget it and say we were gonna contribute it, and I think we just overlooked that when we were making the other transfers, which are also confusing for us every year.
Yeah.
So we have to address that error, which isn't on here, Karen, that you and I have spoken about.
Yes.
So while we're doing that, maybe Kevin could come as well, and we can
Yep.
transfer what interest was made. The endowment's presently in an actual investment vehicle that's not a checking account or a CD.
Park
Yeah.
Place in Brattleboro, and it's only been since, second week in October
Yeah.
or something like that,
Just-
and we're, up $3,000 in the first couple of months, so
Wow.
it's doing something for us
Yeah.
now, which is good.
Yeah, so hopefully we'll be able to put a better number in for the endowment interest in the future, but right now I've just left it.
And that 65% of the endowment is with Park Place right now.
Yes, yeah, and some of it will be in a CD as well, and a small amount will be kept in cash.
What's Park Place?
Financial
Debt
advisors.
Financial Advisors.
Joe
downtown.
P-Check, it used to be P-Check, I
Joe Little?
think, isn't it? Yeah.
Mhm.
Great. And then your expenses on circulating materials, you didn't
Yeah, we
spend
did- we
anywhere
underspent
near as
that.
much.
Yeah,
Was that to make up for some of the expenses in library expenses?
There was a few
that-
things going on there. One was that in the digital content line, the Vermont Department of Libraries picked up the tab for one of our services, which was almost half of it, which was very nice.
Nice.
And that was partially because they were going through a lot of staffing changes at the state level, and I think maybe, I'm not sure what happened with the contract, but basically they were like, we're covering it this year. I think they also had money because of staffing changes and had money to move around and covered it for all the libraries in the state, which was great.
Nice.
But other things like the video and audiobook, I did underspend that on purpose when I noticed we were not massively, we were over in other things. But other things like adult books and juvenile books, I always try to spend all of the money for that, and it's mostly just a matter of when do we receive the books? Are things back ordered? Do we receive them, in August instead of before the end of June? So those are a little bit lower. But good eyes on both of those.
So a couple other points on this budget is health insurance is higher.
Yeah, I mean, their portion of health insurance, I know that health insurance across the board is gonna be higher for us, but, we went from 26,775 to a proposed 38,891.
Can I explain that?
Yes.
So in that, because currently there's a single plan and then there's a two-person plan. And so one of those plans is we're looking at a family plan, just in case there's any changes.
Okay.
There's not to say there's gonna be a change, but there's potentially a change. It's kind of what we're doing with the highway department.
Yeah.
Because if you don't,
If we don't budget for it and a change occurs,
Yeah,
then we
but-
haven't budgeted.
so here's the
Yeah.
question to the select board though, okay? So if we don't budget for a change like that, whether it's in the highway department or in the library, and it does change, we go over budget, but we can justify that.
Right.
So do you want to carry extra, do you want to be conservative and have taxpayers' money go into a fund that may not get used? That's the question to you three.
So I have questions because I'm new here, and it seems like the library functions differently than any other thing that happens in town. And you have your own board, but the town pays for the majority of the operation of the library.
It is a public library, and you guys do.
So I have questions about how that works. So you're presenting us a budget and you have your own board that's voted on what you think should happen, but it's really up to the select board as to what we allocate for funds for the library. Is that right?
Well, it's up to the voters ultimately.
Okay.
I mean,
I'm asking. I'm all new.
yeah, so it's up to us if we accept the proposed budget from the library and present it as part of our
To the
general
voters.
fund budget.
Got it.
Right.
Okay.
Which we can or can't do, but then it's up to the voters then to say, but as I think you know, from the floor at town meeting, if we present a budget that say includes this, but somebody at town meeting says, boy, this whole budget looks great, except I don't want to fund the library to this amount, they can, and then that gets voted on by people, whether that number gets amended, well, they can't amend the number, they can amend the overall number of the general fund.
Of the general
They
fund,
cannot
correct.
amend line items, so
Right.
nobody can specifically mandate, other than us, that the library gets any less funding than it would get.
Okay.
But that's within the context of the voters having weighed in on it, so.
Okay, thank you for that.
And the town can express its clear intent
Intent.
and what it wants us to do.
Yeah, got it.
So they could say, like, we're lowering the budget because of this, and we want you to do this
Got
with
that.
it.
Right.
Okay.
But then that's up to our discretion to
Right.
decide whether we do that or not.
Yeah.
So one other point is salaries. Right now in this budget, there's a 3% cost of living raise. And we already had the discussion
Yeah.
that cost of living right now for 2020 will be 1.6 and the
Got it.
consumer index is like 1.8.
Okay.
So there's a 3% increase in here. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's gonna stay in there.
Right.
So it could go down to 2%, it could go down to whatever. But the total town appropriation to the library from the general fund will be $184,668, which is almost, well, it's a little less than $20,000 increase from last year.
Of that, 12,000 is in that insurance.
Right.
Which is also the issue we had. So the reason we had that conversation and that's built in is because last year we had, I added my partner to the insurance and we had an unanticipated since the previous budget season jump in the insurance and we went over.
Went over budget. But we can justify that.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, this is the reality across the board for us with health insurance, and
Right.
it's one of the few things that predictably jumps multiple percentage points as opposed to a handful of
Right.
percentage
Right.
points, and it's frustrating. This is a different set of circumstances, so that's not strictly a cost increase in the health insurance premium per se.
Right.
It's a difference in
Right.
the package, but health insurance is always a wild card in that respect, and it's frustrating. But I think we're always better off having the money in the budget and then not having to worry about it than having to scrape together. We'd rather have a surplus at the end of the year than a deficit. That having been said, of course, we don't want to be frivolous about that.
Right, and I agree.
But I mean, I would lean hard on you to make a recommendation. I would say, you could split it 50-50 too, and
Right,
say, hey,
right.
let's add 6,000 to it, and then we've hedged.
I mean, we had the conversation with the highway department almost being $60,000 with a benefits package and having somebody at $15 an hour, which
Right.
we've been carrying for 2 years, okay? That's a lot of money,
Yeah,
$12,000 doesn't seem, like a big number, but when you add it to another 60,000, we're reaching the $100,000 mark, So, yeah,
We see the whole picture.
yes, although when you look at the big picture, percentage-wise, that's
Right.
not insignificant, but it's not
yeah.
it's not the, whatever it is we're looking at here, 12% or, no, not quite, yeah, pushing 12%
Right.
overall increase. Yeah, 12% on the town allocation.
But I'll look at it a little more and then we can,
Yeah,
I mean, this is the budget that's presented.
that's
tonight.
being presented,
Yeah.
exactly, so.
But everything else looks like it kind of level funded,
Everything else is pretty, there's modest increases for things that have gone up for us, like our cleaning fees. I added an additional $250 for both adult and children's books. And there are some other small increases. The copier machine lease was a little bit higher, adjusted $100. Yeah, the Parks Pass, we added another $100 to that. But you guys are right, you've already discussed the big stuff, the things that are the meat of the increase.
So I do have a question about, interlibrary loan donation, right?
Yes.
What other fundraising, what are you doing to bring in donations or?
Well, the trustee appropriation, the trustees do their annual appeal and they provide
okay.
$19,000 for their appropriation and then an additional $5,000 plus whatever else they decide to do. Last year, you can see the actual transfer in from fundraising. So those are the fundraising activities are primarily that and our book sale, which is also money that is controlled by the trustees. For other things, when you talk about fundraising, do you mean fee-for-service things or just donations?
Well, yeah, I'm just wondering if there's other ways that the library could bring in
You can generate some.
Yeah,
more-
make some more money.
more revenue.
Like the
Yeah.
annual appeal that you do.
Yeah,
The
annual
plant
appeals.
sale, that's yours, right?
Yeah, the books that we only
We haven't
we've
done the
only
book sale
done a book and plant. We've only done a book sale for the past couple of years, but all of that money that's raised by the annual appeal goes to the trustees to appropriate, and you'll see that it makes up $25,000 of the revenue side of things. For other things, our income, our fees for service are pretty low and at cost. We have a copy machine that we charge 10 cents a page for 25 cents color, the only public one in town. And so, you know, and that's reflected here. We have out-of-town fees, people from outside of Putney who purchase cards at the library. Fines, we don't actually charge fines, but people feel guilty and put money in a small donation box. That amount is mostly that, plus if people lose books. That's the only time we have anything that's, you know, kind of a fine, is for people to reimburse us for those. And then there's the endowment interest. And then other grants that we seek, the Courier grant included, which is a little bit difficult to budget for.
Yeah.
I'm looking at this and feeling guilty. I think I need to donate some fines.
There's no enforcement.
I know, but it is. It really does. That box works, you know.
I wasn't going to single you out.
Well, it's okay. Well,
We're not currently, but we're often in the same boat. So where do library cards, you have out-of-town fees.
Yes.
Where do in-town fees, or are there?
There isn't.
There isn't, okay.
That's that town
Yeah.
allocation part.
Okay, so that's the difference.
It's free.
Yeah.
Yeah, taxpayers all have paid for the library already with their taxes,
Right.
so the card is free in that way.
Yeah.
are you tracking usage?
Yes. Take a look at that infographic.
Yes, look at this information about
Thank you
all
for
that
this.
the library.
Yeah.
This is very helpful.
I was putting together, it's my statistics season too, so I'm putting together all our statistics from fiscal year 2019. And the amount at the bottom that tells you how much value we get for every dollar that was spent in that budget, that's from the American Library Association maintains a library use calculator where it quantifies things like how much it costs to rent a meeting room if ours wasn't free, how much it costs to read an adult book or purchase an adult book, a children's book, a young adult book, what it would cost to go to the equivalent of a story time, you know, for a child, for a parent to bring a child to a story
Use
time.
the computers.
Yeah, use the
People don't have
computer.
computers.
Computer use.
Internet.
Yeah. We actually don't, so this isn't all of our statistics, but many of our statistics are quantifiable. We actually didn't, Wi-Fi sessions aren't one of the things they put a price on because it's not really for charge. But this doesn't reflect all of our use, but it's nice that they can put a dollar value to much of our use.
We're receiving quite the worth of services.
How much is an Amazon library card?
For town employees, it's free. Yes.
I didn't even know that.
Okay, but yes, all right, but to answer your actual question, it's $40 a year.
Again,
So
such
quite
a
a
So
huge
not
deal.
insignificant, but a good value
A
if you
huge
use it.
value.
Yeah.
I think of the
Yeah.
use, what's
Right.
available.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll be in tomorrow to get my card.
Okay, great, yeah. I should put a note in for you guys to put in paychecks that just remind everybody of that. I know when the board made that decision, we sort of put the word out, but it's been a little while and I've been thinking we need to invite all of the town employees to come if they don't live in town and have one already.
Most of our employees do live in town currently, I think, but not, with some exceptions, but many do.
Sitting here.
Yeah.
1, 2,
Yeah.
3, 4.
Anyway,
So Emily, will you have these at town meeting?
Sure.
I think it would be good.
Okay, yeah.
Karen,
That's
Kim,
good.
and
got it.
This is great.
Yeah,
And you have a little.
I like doing it. I was surprised and
Yeah.
myself because I've never used the library use calculator with all our statistics. I always thought of it as a tool for like an individual to use to see how much the library is worth to me if I
Yeah.
you know, read 10 books a year and go to 5 programs and things like that. But I think this is a much, for me, more eye-opening use of it.
It's becoming I mean, obviously this is specific to the library, but I've seen similar calculations on a bunch of different Vermont-related things. And it's useful, exactly, what it generates when $1 of income from this comes in, what does it generate for the regional economy, et cetera. And it's this is a different take on it, but same concept.
Yeah.
Can I make a suggestion?
Please.
Put the link at the bottom so people
Yeah.
can go see
That's
how they
a good idea.
personally benefit.
Yeah, I thought already that I should have had a citation on there, just like, because everybody that sees this says, how'd you get this number? And it's an excellent question.
But it's, it'd be, I'm sure some people would be interested in like just what they're getting
Teasing
them.
personally
Yeah.
from,
Can
yeah.
you hold it up?
It's hard to, I think it'll
I think it
print.
might be hard to.
Wait. No, I got it.
Okay, cool.
Put it on the website? Could this be linked to the?
Well, I just finished it this afternoon, but we can do many things.
Yeah, no, it's great.
With the technology we have, we can do anything.
I know. Do you guys have any more questions about the budget or any other comments to bring back to the library board?
No, but I will up your fines by a little bit. So,
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for visiting. I feel like I learn a lot of everything that happens before we do our thing every time I come to.
And thank you to your trustees as well.
Yes.
Thank you.
and for the invite, thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the holiday this year,
Yes, please.
December 17th
Yeah, come to the library.
at 7 p.m.
Yes. Yeah, go on.
Yeah. And we're gonna do our community potluck here on the 18th
Okay.
at 1 o'clock.
At what?
1 o'clock.
Oh, fun.
Yeah.
Well.
Well,
We had quite the turnout last year.
yes, we did.
We did.
It's on select board night with me, Josh.
Thank you.
Leftovers.
David won't be over jumping at the bit.
You want these for showing after?
Have a good night. Thank you.
The pub closing.
Kevin, we'll get
What are you
together.
gonna do with the pub closing?
Y'all work.
Yeah, this next week.
I'll just work more.
Yeah.
And spend less.
I was worried
It's
for
the
you
only
at first
social
when
life
I saw
have.
that. I
It is
was,
the only social, I was gonna buy the place, but I can't afford it. And I would just lose money. I drink all the profits.
having owned a bar, yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't really, because I actually don't drink that much, but I couldn't possibly, I didn't know no one that would work harder than JD&G would work.
Yeah.
Like, if they can't do it, I can't imagine.
It's a labor of love.
And I hate to say that because I really want someone to do it, because this, have one more business close in this town, it's just tragic.
Yeah.
Okay.
5 to open up, not one more to close.
Okay, general fund budget.
So you have a draft general fund budget in front of you. It will change, but I don't think it's gonna change significantly. I'm narrowing down a number for workman's compensation, which is on page 6. We just barely get the numbers from VLCT last week, and Alyssa did do a spreadsheet, so I should be able to throw those numbers together, but I just want to confirm them. And then on page 8, VLCT passive insurance, that number's going to go up. And now with the
And that, just
Yeah.
so we're clear, that's basically our general liability policy, correct?
correct, on our equipment, our buildings,
Yeah,
Yeah.
across the board.
yes, yep,
For everything.
everything.
Here, fire
Yeah.
station, for
Yeah.
everything.
Everything.
Well, the
municipal.
highway is separate, it's in their own
Budget.
budget.
Okay.
Okay, but the fire department, the library, sewer, water sewer, everything in here, yes, is in this big number.
Wow.
And VLCT, I mean, we have exited the VLCT passive at times in the past, and then going back to it. It's, you know, it's, yeah, for a handful of years, we were not part of the
I didn't
passive.
know that.
Yeah.
I'm all about, shopping.
Well, that's exactly why,
Yeah.
And then we decided to go back because I think we discovered really that the sort of hidden value in it was not that insignificant. And, you'd have to look back to see when but it's, I want to say 6 or 7 years ago, we were out of it for a couple of years.
All right.
But for exactly, I mean, we were shopping it back and forth, but then
Yeah.
it just,
It's so easy.
we decided to go back. They're so well
know
suited
all
to
the
do,
laws,
exactly,
Right.
yeah,
everything.
yeah,
Yeah, and
No,
the process is simple.
right,
You go online and you do a claim, or
Yeah.
you can add a vehicle,
yeah.
whatever, it's really simple.
But, and I think that you know, the benefits of that outweighed the difference. And I want to say it was somewhere in, for the whole package, which at that time was 65,000 or something.
Yeah, it's up to 82 now.
I was going to say,
82,000, yeah.
I think I want to say it was a sort of $8,000 difference that we were able to
Oh, yeah.
get it down by using
Yeah.
somebody else, and it
Yeah.
just wasn't enough to make it
Yeah.
worth it over time.
Yeah.
So, but I agree, I mean, you know, just good practice would
Right.
be to put it out to bid again.
Right.
But just, there are definite benefits to being part of
Yeah.
passive.
And there's a lot of eggs in VLCT's basket.
Absolutely, yeah.
Many, many
A lot of
municipalities.
strength, yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of institutional knowledge
Right.
about state stuff that's valuable to us.
So on page 11, the library appropriation will change. So,
If we
right,
accept that proposal.
correct.
Right.
Yep, so it'll go up from the 164,416.
And 12 of that is insurance and 8 of that is salaries.
Right. Or five.
And
Five.
then, yeah, and then there's a few thousand of various other things.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah,
And that's at 3%
3%.
raise in salaries.
Yeah. I mean, we can reduce it, or we leave it in at 3% and not use it. But it's gonna have to be across the board though, if we do that.
Yeah.
Okay, I want-
Well, is there any law that says
Thing behind
that
the
you have
question
to give
after.
raises based on what the
Yeah, cost of living
cost of living?
and the consumer index. So
If
you look
if
at-
they say numbers, we have to use those numbers, we can't?
No,
No, you don't, because some towns too, and I think Brattleboro last year was like low.
right.
Low, not even. In the last 2 years here in Putney, it's been a 3% increase, okay?
Yeah. And I think I spoke about this before, but the frustrating thing is, as we all know, even at 3%, which is generous, I think, you know, you watch how things are going up in price, and 3% is,
Right, it gets swallowed
it's
up.
not adequate.
Yeah.
I mean, but
Yeah,
do we feel comfortable making that decision for other taxpayers who are squeezing
Correct.
to pay their taxes?
Correct.
And that's a tough one.
and that's
Well, it
the
is,
thing we have to
considering how we're
remember,
giving
because
money
the
in this town.
taxpayers
Right.
are funding the general fund,
Right.
the library, the highway
Right.
department. So,
Have you like figured out what a difference in like 1% would be? And see if it's even a significant at all number, you know what I mean? Like,
That's a really good question.
you know,
Yeah.
if you put 3% of the budget, but you decide to do 2%, what's really gonna be left over?
Well, and how
Well-
much does that affect an individual taxpayer?
Right, is it
On
a
the value
dollar?
of 100,000?
You know, like-
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
No,
but
and
the
we've
thing
done that
is,
before, and it's,
yeah, and if you do
Pretty
that on $43,000, you know, and then for everybody else, you know, it becomes a bigger number.
Right, yeah, because like you said, we'd have to do it across the board.
But we also have to consider too, by 2024, minimum wage in Vermont is supposed to be $15 an hour. So how do you get people to be realigned before 2024? You know?
well, that's mostly just, I mean,
So the 3% could help us get to that $15 an hour.
right, is that just FTEs, or is it, it's only full-time people that are 15, or it's 15 across the board, even for, so
The
like
minimum wage
our
will
per
be-
diems at the library will all be 15, which I'm assuming they aren't currently, but maybe they are. Do you
Yeah,
know
that's
how
gonna
much
be
we
my
pay them?
question, who isn't near
Yeah.
15 at this point?
There's,
So it's gonna have to be everybody, so all your lifeguards, like it's minimum wage, like
Yeah.
that's
Right,
just
yeah.
what it is.
yeah.
Now, I thought too, and I was trying to think this through, I said, well, I don't think the seasonal people, but minimum wage is minimum
It's
wage.
We had to raise it last year when it
Right.
went
Right.
from 1078 to
No,
11.
that's what I'm wondering, I
Right.
mean, per diems, that's,
Right.
it's not just full-time.
Right,
Right,
it's gonna
okay.
be
That's what I-
everybody.
that's sort
Minimum
of what I
wage
assumed.
is minimum
Yeah,
wage,
okay.
whether you're hourly,
Yeah,
seasonal, on-call,
And right now it's 11.
It will be 1098,
10,
I
yeah,
think,
it's 10,
January,
20 something now.
January 1st. I had that in the last
Right,
meeting.
it's
but-
1078 now, it's gonna
Right.
be 11.8, right?
Yeah, not even 11
It's
though.
gonna be
It's
10.
gonna be 1096 or 1098. So,
But all the people that are full-time employees, not lifeguards or per diems at the library, are all at or near 15 an hour now, correct? We had this discussion about.
no, I.
Almost, no, not quite.
Not, no,
There's a couple.
there's a few people that are,
Yeah.
yeah. Less than a
Close.
hand.
Close.
Yeah.
Close.
But they're close, that's what you were
Yeah.
saying, right?
Yeah,
So that's not too much of a stretch for us by 2024.
no.
No, I think we will get that.
Right.
But
No,
it'd
and
be
that
nice
3%,
line.
that 3% wouldn't apply to our, I mean, cost of living increase would not apply to our seasonal people.
No.
No,
Right.
no,
And
no,
does it
definitely
apply
not.
to the per diems or not?
So, right, which is exactly where I was thinking, exactly, right.
No. They get raises one time.
Yeah, no, I
Yeah,
think
they'll get a
that's,
raise, and then the library too, they have some part-time people, and I.
that's what I'm talking about, the
No, and I
library
have not
folks, yeah.
seen,
A cost
any-
of living
no.
increase on that,
no,
but they give them raises, so, I mean, it's 6 of one, that doesn't, the
I
other
don't
acts
think they do it
don't.
on the same schedule.
no, I think for
Yeah.
full-time people,
Right,
definitely.
get cost of living. and
Yes.
then- Yeah, no,
Yes.
that makes sense to me, but that's all they, well, yeah, I guess we're paying all of them, but.
But something to think about. But I can do some number crunching and just see where it comes, you know. If
So
it's-
you mentioned the number 44,000. Is that the amount of increase if we do 3%? Is that where you came
No,
up with that
no.
number?
No, I was just saying if you got like 42,000 times 3%.
Oh, okay. So
You
you
know,
were just picking a
yeah,
salary
and then-
level,
yeah,
for
you got
example.
55,000, 3%.
Right, right.
You know, you got 2,000 here, you got 3,000 there,
Right.
you got another
Yeah,
3,000
yeah.
here.
Times
You
how
know?
many employees.
Right,
right.
Before you know.
You know, and on average, I can, you know, pretty
Right.
much figure it out, you know.
Right.
52,000, you know,
Times how many people at 3%.
yeah. But we can generate a number just
Definitely.
as an
Yeah.
exercise to
it's
see,
no.
you know?
No, and it's sort of generally, each additional $21,000 on the general fund is an increase of 1% on the tax rate. So, an increase of 1 penny on the tax rate.
1 penny, yes. Yeah.
So, you know, then how you translate that when you're trying to think about it that way is a little tricky, but
Right.
that would give us a number
Right. So.
that would tell us
Yeah,
how
so
much
you go
more
back to
somebody.
the extra highway guy at
Per
$60,000,
$100,000 worth of
another
property value,
12
that
here
means-
and another, you know, 3% for everybody else.
Right.
Then, you know, you're looking at $100,000.
And you're looking at roughly a 5 cent
Right.
on the
Divided by
municipal.
24,000, you know,
Exactly.
so
Yeah.
what, and it's up to the select board too.
Well, it's
Yeah,
always a
but
hard
it's
one
to
for me
see
because I'm
what
trying to
kind of
think about
raises we
it
have
as
to
this
do
job, and I'm
each
trying to
year
think
in
about
order
it
to
as a
get to
taxpayer in the town
$15
too, and how somebody else, and it's like, I was laying in the middle, and it's like, it's not good either way.
Right.
I don't know what to do with that. It's
Right.
like, you know,
It's tough.
I can't afford to pay any more taxes.
No,
I
and
can't, but then at the same
So
time, there's all
the
these
parts-
services that have to be funded, and I see that.
Yeah.
So, you know,
No.
how do we all tighten our belts a little and think about how do we generate more money from business? and
Yeah.
Take the weight off the homeowners.
Right.
Huge problem, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
No,
think
and I-
about
you
how
know-
to get some money in.
Right. No, and you know, for anybody, higher taxes is not desirable. For some, a very small increase makes a very big difference, you know,
hear that.
and that's not a small sum. So, the amount of people that it affects that way is not small.
Right.
I mean, an extra $10 a year
Yeah.
makes a big difference.
Right. You
So,
know, when we're looking at, you know, new equipment too, you know, you gotta take that into consideration. So there's a lot of variables here and it's, where do you shave?
We need a casino.
Nice try.
Hospital is open.
there There you go.
We need one paying less taxes.
So I would like,
Yeah, I don't think that's panned out quite the way I hoped it was going to, but.
Humor can be part of this board.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
so while you're looking at the library budget, you can look over the general fund budget, and I'll have it updated for the next meeting.
That's good.
Thank you.
And any questions that you have, can you write them down? And you can always come in and talk to me too.
Okay. Recycling solid waste.
So another topic of discussion, I've had people, and this happened last year around the same time, it's budget season, people are asking what's gonna happen with recycling. Are we gonna have a program? So,
Well, be new here again. We had a program and then we don't have a program. And I know how that affected me individually.
yeah,
And I don't understand what it cost and why we stopped it. So maybe we could just have a quick.
We have all those numbers. Chip
had
we
those
worked through
numbers.
that, yeah.
I can tell you,
I don't have to get
Well-
big can of worms, just some.
And
Yeah, yeah.
just to
Yeah.
clarify, we still have a program, it's just not a very convenient program for our townsfolks.
We have the ability to go to Ferry Road.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right, so it just doesn't have the
Which costs a good
convenience
amount of
that we
money,
have.
too.
Not for recycling.
Recycling is free, yeah.
well, I instructed a new person that just moved into town that they could take their recycling down there, and
Yes.
apparently it was not the case that it was free.
It's supposed to be.
Yeah, that's what I thought, and
Well-
so I
Do
feel,
they have to pay the annual fee
You
to
might,
get
yeah,
recycling
I
for
don't
free?
know.
I don't know. It must have changed, because I was always under the impression that recycling was a free service.
Yeah.
Well, because we pay like $6,000 something for that, right?
No, we pay Wyndham Solid Waste Management. There's an-
Significantly more than $6,000.
There's an assessment that every town gets.
23-ish.
No, it's gone down, I think it's gonna be like 18,000 for 21.
But it was up quite a bit more when we had, it was up more than that when we had the recycling.
I was gonna
Right.
say, the difference must have
But they were
been
losing money.
financially motivated, so we
So-
stopped having the receptacles here because of the cost.
Right,
That's, I don't even know
They
why.
stopped, they
That's
stopped
fine.
placing them here because of the cost.
Got it, okay.
right.
You know, I mean, one of the big challenges for them is just that the recycling, their ability to sell recycled product is
The commodity
very
is-
volatile.
Yeah.
And so, you know, they would do okay some years and take a bath other
Good.
years. And right now, recycling, I mean, you know, glass and metals are still reasonably valuable, but like paper recycling
Yeah.
has zero value. I mean, that most of it's ending up in, I don't know about from here, but much of it across the country is ending up in landfills because it has no value.
BPR had an interesting report on this recently.
Is that because we don't have any paper mills?
Well, no, it's largely because the Chinese stopped taking it. They were buying it all and they stopped for a number of different reasons. But that just absolutely wiped out our market for it.
So the assessment has been going down over the years. So in 19, it was $25,515. And last year, well, this year, 20,000. And then for 21, I've got it budgeted for 18,000. So, curbside pickup for recycling and solid waste in Westminster is $200,000 a year. Whoa. So again, you know,
Wait,
if
say that again? Curbside,
pickup for recycling
only recycling.
and solid waste.
They get a certain number of bags a year
Right.
of stuff
So you have-
allocated
yeah,
per
you-
household and they
They
pick
buy
them.
tags over there,
Right.
you only get 52 tags, so it's one bag a
One
week.
bag a week, right.
And
You
then,
can buy more, but
You
you have to
can
pay
buy
for
more,
it.
yep. But they pick the recycling up with the solid waste the same day, and it's every week.
And it's still
Different
only
truck,
200? I thought it was more than that at
No,
this
it's
point.
200,000, I had
Thank you.
I have his town report from last year.
I thought it was going up more than that as more of the recycling recycling laws came into play, but maybe that, I don't know.
I haven't seen the budget up there for
Yeah,
21.
I think it's higher than that, but,
The only other option too, Laura, is to have like Triple T bring in, the roll-offs.
Yeah,
But then you have to have a place to put them, and
some kind of security.
you have to have security, because you will have people from other towns dropping that stuff in there, and it will cost Putney residents, not the outsiders.
And as we saw with these roll-offs, people will also dump trash if it's unsecured.
Right.
And then we have to handle that.
and in fact, even if it's secured, they'll still dump trash, but
Probably,
yes,
but-
yeah.
So right now, the only option is curbside, whether or not Putney wants to pay that cost. Um,
What do you mean the only option? Not for recycling.
Well.
I mean, we could do something different, but, I mean, we could have
but you can't
roll-offs back
control it.
here.
You can't control it.
Well, we could make that choice. I mean,
But where would you put it?
Highway department, we've looked into this
Gated?
extensively. Not necessarily. Security cameras, I mean, we've looked into, where the sand pile is at the
Right,
highway
right.
department.
Sure.
Essentially carving out a spot there
And who
and having it this
enforces-
side of the gate.
Who enforces somebody
That's,
for,
that's
you know?
all, that's the
Yeah.
questions. But that is a possibility. We could
Yeah.
do that. And we did all the numbers on that. The problem is we can't, because one of the problems with predicting the numbers is that our recycling, we were by far the most prolific recyclers in Windham County.
Right.
Makes sense.
But that's largely because everybody driving by knew where it was
Right.
and put
And it
it.
was
I
easy to
think
get
many
to.
Dummerston folks used our,
Totally,
Yeah.
Dummerston, Westminster,
I
all,
used it.
Yeah.
people from all over.
Because it was
used it.
convenient.
Totally
I was
convenient.
going to work every day and
Exactly.
I was driving by.
Right, yeah.
yeah.
Boy, you're on camera now.
I know.
It's not that she says that, it's she says that with no sense of guilt. That's all
There's no remorse.
Exactly. It's
Don't
like,
raise
wait
her
a
view.
minute.
That's recycling.
But it's recycling.
But just the act of recycling makes it okay.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
I know that
It's
when,
altruistic.
when I couldn't bring it down here anymore, it added $46 a month to my trash pickup at my
Yep.
shop.
Now, this is,
$50 a month.
Yeah.
and this is the thing.
For
the
just me.
state
And I know I generate a
mandated-
lot of recycling because of my business, so it's a lot of packaging, so
Right.
a lot of cardboard.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Most
but-
weeks I fill a 3-yard dumpster twice.
But it would be $46
Right,
for anybody,
right.
even if you
So,
didn't do that.
so having some kind of program, I think is great, whatever, even if they have to drive to Brattleboro. But
Well, the state mandated the recycling program.
Right.
Everybody got on board. Wyndham Solid Waste pulled the plug out of the whole,
Right.
and the towns are left to figure it out,
We should bring up that math. Chip would know if, I'm sure we have it somewhere because we went through it. I want to say that for townwide pickup, we were estimating that it was going to be over 300. But that may be wrong. Our demographics are very similar to Westminster, so they
Yes,
should be
yeah.
similar. But,
Yeah.
I can't help but wonder too, though, if Westminster had started this so long ago, if they're not seeing the increases that we would see starting it now. You know what I mean?
yes and no, but that's what I'm recalling is that when it was passed in Westminster, which wasn't that long ago, 5 years ago maybe?
No, I was there.
So roughly 5 years ago?
Well, I've been here, 2 years? Oh, yeah. 2 years I've been here already.
Right.
So, but recycling really, the market became volatile.
Right.
Just
Well, it's
about.
always been volatile, but it really bottomed out.
Yeah, it's,
So, and I think I was there my second year when we got the program going.
Yeah.
For curbside. So, yeah, it's been,
I was under the impression that increase was gonna be dramatic.
no, and I know what you're talking about
Yeah.
because the SWIP, see, all that changed
Right.
when Wyndham Solid Waste.
Right, so
Stop
maybe
doing
those
the-
numbers
yeah.
aren't the same as
Right.
what we were looking at.
Right.
But my recollection about the recycling was that it was gonna cost us somewhere between $40,000 and $60,000 a year just to have the service, i.e. to have rentals sitting there, and then you pay tipping. And the difficult part again for us about that was we had no accurate way to assess what the tipping was. But, you know, Triple T, we put it out as an RFP and the only response we got was from Triple T. Nobody else was interested.
Well, if they can't sell
Can
the
you-
products for anything, who's gonna do the
Right.
service, right?
I know what tipping is, but can you explain it just because it's a term that we use in restaurants, but in garbage it's a totally different thing in recycling.
Right, tipping fees are what you pay to dump those. So
Yeah.
the dumpsters, you pay two things. You pay an upfront fee for essentially rental of the dumpsters per year. And then you pay trucking fees, which is for them to come once a week. But for example, when the recycling was here, they came 2 to 3 times a week here because our volume was so high. When recycling had some value, that was great for them. But when it doesn't have value, then they're coming 2 or 3 times a week and they're not making anything off it, and they can't do that. So you pay the trucking fees, which are fixed. That's basically the distance from here to the location of wherever you're taking it to, and then the tipping fee is based on the weight of what you're dumping. So it's a combination of all of those things. So depending on your volume, that expense can, you know, there's both trucking and tipping involved, and that's a big variable. So, but we could do it. We've looked into it. You know, we could certainly look into it again. It's a question of whether we feel it's worth $80,000 a year to have recycling in town. For many people, the answer is an obvious yes.
Right.
For many other people, I'm sure the answer is a very obvious no.
It's no for me, because I can walk 50 feet and fill a dumpster, and it costs me more to fill my truck 3 times a week and bring it down here.
Exactly. But you're atypical in that
Right.
respect because of the
Right.
volume you produce. And for somebody who, you know, has one little bag of recycling a week, and they can take it to, you know, Ferry Road once a month and pay nothing to get rid of it, they say, what, my taxes are gonna go up again?
Right.
Based on this? It's hard.
And curbside pickup also is only for single-family dwellings.
Not rentals.
Not
Not
commercial.
commercial
Yeah.
businesses and not
Right.
any rentals.
So that takes part of that out of the.
Yeah, so we
Yeah.
would have to know what those numbers were, because would it make sense, you know?
And then it leaves the businesses hanging. But the businesses, I mean, you know, the other thing is, as long as we're staying, the whole assessment to Wyndham Solid Waste is based on the fact that we are participating in their solid waste management plan.
Right.
So regardless of what we do with it, unless we were to form our own solid waste district, which we
Yes.
also could do,
Yeah.
we would still be paying this assessment to them regardless of how we
absolutely right.
manage it. So,
Yeah.
but we could form our own district, but then we have to do all the paperwork and all the bureaucratic stuff involved in doing that.
Yeah.
And we have to have
State
approved infrastructure, et
regulations.
cetera.
Yeah.
You
What we
know,
really have to do is find out a way to make recycling profitable.
have some money
Somebody
back
can
in
make
there.
it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
yes.
Some interesting uses happening in Vermont that are changing the landscape a little bit, but not quickly enough.
No, and not on the scale. Yeah, definitely.
So we keep coming back to this conversation around the same time of year when it feels like it's almost too late
It
to
is, yeah.
do anything about it. Wouldn't it be worth it for us to call a special meeting and get from the town, like, and share this information with them? Because I feel like that we keep having this conversation, but it's not getting out there to the larger community. And
meeting.
then they're just coming back with the same questions.
Town meeting, I think,
I
is a
mean,
good place.
yes, I think one of the problems, and this is a perennial problem we have, is that if you have a special town meeting, the people that are going to come to a special town meeting are those who are least likely to be adversely affected by this in a significant way. And that's just a problem, you know, that's universal. But, you know, when we do public meetings, it's largely people who are already reasonably involved in issues and or educated about them, et cetera. And so we tend to miss a big demographic of people that are the least likely to be supportive of something like this, and that's tricky, and I'm not saying we shouldn't do it because of
No,
that, but it's a reality that we face.
So the next question is, how do we get them in the room?
This is the question I ask myself
Yeah.
every week I come here, because I am one of them, and the fact that I'm here is because he kept coming and talking to me and saying, why don't you come to town meeting? And I know so many people that don't know anything about what's going on in town. And they're all really good people, and they're
Yeah.
really hardworking, decent people who want to know why their taxes are so high, and they don't get involved. And I keep telling them, you have to get involved. And as out of my element as I am here, I am so glad that I know more than I did before. And I have tons more to learn. But you're right, that is what needs to happen.
And
Everybody needs to chime in and get involved so that we can really know what they want and what they think, and back to the conversation.
And also so they can, they can hear all of the information,
Right,
because they might change their minds about things
Right.
that they didn't expect that they would.
And
So-
we might learn that what the general populace wants isn't what the people who show up and tell us
Yeah.
they want, because they're such a small percentage.
Yeah.
the only way we can even remotely effectively do that is sending out mailers and we've done this, and I can't remember the context that we did it in, but we solicited feedback from everybody with an address, and we got more feedback than we'd ever gotten on anything else. We still didn't get anywhere near, I can't remember what the percentages is. I can't remember. It was a town plan issue or something, I can't remember, but honestly, in order to really do that effectively, it's like census taking. I mean, you virtually have to go door to door in order to get an accurate.
And in the last 2 weeks, I've had at least a half a dozen people come up to me and ask me questions about this stuff, and I go, come to the meeting. Please, 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 come to the meeting. Just come to the meeting.
Yeah.
Man, come to the meeting. Come to the meeting.
Yep.
I don't, you need to talk to some other people too. I know very little so far.
Maybe if we did a potluck.
Free beer. Free beer might do it.
Free beer, okay, so you bring the raspberry cordial and.
Yeah, it's hard, because my experience with particularly
Honey,
with the
say it again. This is my deaf ear.
recycling, the ones who are most vocal about it, in fact, are business owners.
Right.
You can't say
Because they're
that.
the ones for whom it's a huge pain in the neck.
Yeah.
And they're the ones that we wouldn't be able to support with curbside.
Exactly,
Right.
no, it's really a dilemma,
Yeah. But it is a consensus, so we have to figure out what they actually want.
Well, what's the consensus? Consensus is that we have a problem, or,
No, I think we need to ask the question again, because people keep bringing it up,
Yeah.
So how do we ask it in a way that we get enough people answering it? We finding out what they want.
Just send a
giving-
postcard
so
with a
that-
checkbox.
So that this is not a moot point, so we don't have 100 people out of how many people live in town?
Can we do an unofficial ballot? Like, could we do a survey at town meeting day?
Yeah.
yeah, again, the demographic you're gonna get is just,
Yeah.
But we'll get a larger
No-
demographic because it's a presidential election.
true,
But
yeah.
So we might actually get
The
more
timing might
people.
be good.
We get more, yeah,
Right.
no, no,
It's when we're gonna get the most of them.
Yes.
In the room.
Right.
probably, and even that number's not enough, but yeah.
It's not,
yeah,
but it's,
but
look,
better.
it's better than
I
what
get it.
we're getting
Yeah.
now.
No, I get it.
And if it were a very simple survey that they could fill out while they voted, or before they voted, or after they vote, I don't care when, just,
Yeah.
if it were something that we had in town hall, we had it available in multiple places, the library.
The hard thing about that, and we could certainly do that. I think the hard thing about it is really what's lacking is the educational component of it. So, if we do a survey, how do you try and get some of that educational information out there to people before they're answering questions? Because,
I agree.
and also the money aspects of it. I mean, when we,
Right.
we had this exact discussion numerous times based on, with Cynthia and with Chip, and coming up with new numbers and different numbers and so on. And each time it was like, wow, that's a lot of money to just bite off in order to have the convenience of recycling. And I loved having it. I would pay what it would cost on my taxes but I don't feel that's fair necessarily to do to everybody, because
Right.
there's a lot of people who I don't think would. But yeah, how do you present it in a way so that those survey questions are, because I think if to take the most simple side of it of saying, would you like to have recycling in town? I can't imagine anybody's gonna say no.
Right.
But if you say, would you like to have recycling in town if it's gonna cost you an extra, $2.20 per 100,000 of value on your land, and,
Yeah.
that translates to so on, suddenly you've lost
Yeah,
a lot of people.
it's sticky. And I just keep trying to encourage people to reduce, so you don't have to recycle. as
Yeah.
much.
But I do think, Karen, there should be a file on that somewhere, and I don't know whether you could touch base with Chip, or I don't know where we'd find it, but we definitely have. I mean, they'd be old bids now, but we have bids and we have numbers as to what trucking would cost and everything. It's not or we could ask for new ones.
That might be wise at this point.
Is there an opportunity to partner with Westminster over curbside, if that were something we would?
No, because they're contracted with Ruggiero.
Yeah.
So I spoke to Joe and he said, well, find out what the community wants, And he goes, we can talk.
Yeah.
So is it curbside or is it just, containers, So.
Yeah, or, I mean, I think the other thing that Westminster has going for them, as we do with Ferry Road, but it's closer proximity, is that the transfer station.
Yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah.
which is right there.
Yeah.
It's very convenient for them. For us, it's all the way down Ferry Road, which is
Right.
not that convenient.
Right.
And, I mean, when you look at the resources expended for people to go and do the recycling there compared to having dumpsters in town, it's crazy. I mean, there's nothing good about that, but. And we could consider having our own transfer station.
Not right now.
I feel like that's just like in the same, on the same level as considering having our own police department almost. So,
Find out from towns who have it, what it costs, like what it's.
I actually my parents live in a very similar demographic town down in northwestern Connecticut, and their annual budget they have a mini transfer station. It's really cool, a little teeny compactor, recycling, a couple sheds. It's all right by their highway department. Their annual budget is roughly 160, 170, something like that, which was lower than I assumed it would be, but it's not a small number. And they've got one full-time person and one part-time person, and they're open, Wednesdays and Saturdays from 8 to noon, and one sort of semi-evening or something like that.
And it's just for single families, it's not for businesses, do businesses use it?
Do they have to buy
That's a good
tickets?
question, I'm not sure. They don't have as much of a commercial base as we do, but I don't know.
Like Springfield,
No,
you have to buy tickets?
no, you just take your trash in. You have to do it, I mean, there's no collection, but you just go in, I mean, it's paid for in your taxes, as long as you're a town resident, you can go for free. So, it's a great little setup, I think it would be
How do
awesome,
you
but
determine-
it's,
residency?
Right, if people are just able to walk in and, like
in
how-
their situation, it's largely because the guy who runs it has been there forever and he knows everybody.
Oh, yeah.
But, whether I would guess maybe they give permits, but I'm not sure.
On your
I mean, if you pay taxes, you can
Right.
use it, so.
Right, you get it on your windshield.
Exactly, and I don't think they have that, but there must be some there, I don't know, it's a good question, I don't know. But it would be great to do that, but it's another department, So whenever Karen's ready to sign up for another department, just let us know.
You're funny, Josh.
No, and in the past, they made some
You
money
find
off
a
the
place
recycling.
to sell the compacted cardboard nobody wants.
Yeah, right now.
Right.
no.
You have everybody. coming to Putney.
No, they actually-
Then you open up a cardboard burning power plant.
They do a very cool thing too called Art at the Dump, which they, every year, they have an annual thing, local
Yeah.
artists collect and make art, and it
Yeah.
gets sold, and it's all to benefit. I think it's the school,
And if
but
that doesn't
it's
fit in
something.
Putney, where would it fit?
It's really
Plenty of
cool.
artists in town.
Yeah.
Add its crafts.
Plenty.
Yeah.
It's a neat thing, it's
Yeah.
great. I
And it
actually,
brings
every,
money.
yeah,
That's,
Huh?
it's
that's a
very
good
cool.
idea.
Yeah,
I know.
very good.
I like
I know.
that.
And it's community involved.
Here
Yeah,
we go.
nice.
But anyway, okay.
All right, so moving on to broadband municipal program.
We're not taking our time here on anything, all right?
And I'm gonna connect the connectivity survey into the broadband municipal program.
Sounds good.
So Wyndham Regional was supposed to get information out, and I had a chat with Chris Campney, and he wanted me to sit on our connectivity survey. So Alyssa and I,
Wanted you to sit on our connectivity, sorry.
yeah, not send it out yet,
Oh, okay.
okay?
Yeah.
Because there's something brewing down at Wyndham Regional, and they're
Okay.
trying to get all the municipalities involved, and I have not seen the information yet. But Alyssa and I, so every month we look at the telephone bill and cry. So it was Fairpoint, now it's consolidated. So our phone bill went from, we have 17 lines in town. And I would say probably 6 maybe have our alarms, okay? Dedicated HOTS lines for our alarms.
Right.
And then the rest are telephone lines, okay? So we went from $17.50 per line up to $25 per line because the contract expired. So I had a teleconference with Regina, our representative, and I'm like, yeah, I can't sign this. I said, you gotta do something with these numbers. You gotta find a way to lower this bill. So right now our bill is what, almost $700 a month?
More than that.
And before the jump, it was $493, which I'm not okay with. I think it's way too much for the use on those lines.
Well,
But
it was $493 just for the, you know what I mean, it wasn't the
The
total
e-pack.
bill, it was 600 something was the total bill. So now it's gone up over $100
Yeah.
because we didn't sign a contract because we really don't want to.
yeah,
We want them to lower it.
so while I had the conversation with her about lowering the bill for what we have, I asked the question, I go, what do we have in town for fiber? So apparently Putney has fiber on all the poles. The problem is,
Not on all the poles, or not on all the poles, everywhere. We have fiber on all the poles that would serve the municipal buildings you're
Right,
talking about.
right.
In town.
It's not everywhere. I know it stops on my road.
Yeah, fiber's not universal throughout the entire
alright,
town.
so she misunderstood my question, because
Right.
my question is because of this broadband program that the state and Wyndham Regional are encouraging towns to buy into as a utility. So I wanna know where the fiber is in town. Because if the fiber is, it's not gonna be cheaper, but if we buy into it, it'll be less expensive. So for single-family homes or anyone to hook into that fiber, it's very expensive every month, okay? But as a municipality and servicing it as a utility to the community, they can reduce that cost. So between the phones and the fiber, I'm trying to work with Consolidated to see if it's even gonna be feasible. But I'm not okay with the phone bill being that high.
Yeah, I mean, I think
It just doesn't make
that-
any sense.
I think that the connectivity survey is to find out who has fiber, who doesn't. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, very basic.
And what people want in Putney.
Can we add recycling to this?
I know, right? You have a dual survey.
If we're gonna send out a survey, we should definitely think about that,
Yeah,
because it's
maybe
not
we do.
expensive to send out a survey, I mean,
Right.
it's not inexpensive to
Right.
send out a survey.
And we can do it through different platforms.
Yeah.
Not just, you know,
Right.
mailing. So the broadband program it's gonna be rolled out. I don't have enough education on it to really like explain it now. Chesterfield, New Hampshire just bought into Consolidated, where they can all connect to the fiber. And it was a loan.
Yeah, but that's
I know,
that's a
I know.
misnomer to say they can all, I mean, you can all connect into the fiber if you have fiber, but if
Right,
you don't
if
have
you're in the right
fiber,
place.
But apparently they do for each home. It's on the poles in Chesterfield, but it's whether or not the people will be able to afford the connection.
I don't know this, but I don't think that's true in Putney.
it's
because
definitely not true.
I know that it never went past the grammar school until a couple of
Till-
years ago.
exactly.
So
And
she
2 years ago,
she
we passed the grammar
misunderstood
school
the
and it
question
stopped
I
at
was
my folks'
asking,
house.
because I wanna know how much fiber is in Putney.
I'm thinking because you were having a discussion about the municipal
yeah,
buildings,
okay.
is she was thinking all your municipal buildings are served by fiber,
Yeah.
which is true. But there, I mean, it was for a long time, it was just a single run on Main Street, then it went up to the school, then it went, and then the grammar school funded it to go up, Putney School also funded to go up there. Greenwood, I think, Landmark, obviously, they all have done this, but, you know, you go out on, I mean, we have it now, what happened 3 years ago now, probably,
Yeah.
was a whole group of people got together and said, you know, basically worked as a block and said to Southern Vermont Cable, how much would it cost us to put fiber to these, I think it was 65 homes.
Yeah.
And what they did is they came up with a deal in which he said, as long as X number of people commit for X
Yeah.
period of time,
Right,
I'll run the fiber because that'll make it worth it.
yeah.
And then, but since Consolidated has put in fiber additionally,
Yes.
but I do
They
not
come to
believe
my,
that it
they come
goes
to my shop
everywhere.
now, but they don't go any further up Black Locust Road, and I made that happen because I needed it for my work.
Right,
And I think if you look at, I mean, probably the best informed person who would not be neutral, but who might be able to help you understand some of the connectivity and issues is Ernie, who runs Southern Vermont Cable. He's very knowledgeable about Putney's cable, about Putney's fiber information. Nice guy, has worked well with us for years on various different things. And, you know, he would either have that information on the tip of his tongue or say, this is where you go to find it.
right.
Because he knows that. It's possible.
Karen, are you bringing this
Might-
up
you
as
might have, I don't know.
you're saying Chesterfield bought it as a town? And the town is paying for,
So the town got the loan to put in
The
fiber.
infrastructure.
Yes.
and the taxpayers have to pay that back?
It's collected through Consolidated, that's the weird thing. There was a big article on it. And then they pay a certain amount and then for so many years, and that when the loan's paid off, and then it
Right,
drops.
in theory.
Yes, in theory. Yeah.
Yeah, that's,
I've never known anything go down the price.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I heard that, yeah.
But I would have to think too that they would have to have a certain number, like you said.
Right, to make it worth their while.
To make it worth their
It
while.
has to be,
Yeah.
well, and that's where the municipality could
Yeah.
come into that. They could say,
Right.
we levy an additional tax in order to underwrite
Right.
this, it's paid back over
Right.
time.
Yeah.
But again, you know, who?
But see,
who
the
feels they
survey
have
will
to
tell
have
us, you know, what the community, what the need is.
that? Yeah.
What the need is you more than one company that offers it.
Right.
Which we have. I mean, Southern Vermont Cable, you know, that's who I would suggest you talk to Southern Vermont Cable, because they definitely
Right.
have, and they do phone lines, they do everything, you
There's
know.
bigger companies too up north. Because the whole state of Vermont is trying to run a major artery down through.
Right,
And then the smaller towns connect into it.
feed off of it.
Yeah.
Right,
yeah.
exactly. Well, we're already, I mean, we have that main rib right on Route 5,
Yeah.
but part of the problem is the further you get away,
Right.
the slower your speeds
Right.
are, so.
You know, and I look at Springfield and Brattleboro, and I'm like, well, those are hub cities, you know?
Right.
Hub towns, municipalities. And, you know, if they don't have it, then it's like, why, you know? But if we could connect into those areas, then it shouldn't be that difficult, and it shouldn't cost that much money.
It's the whole, you know, for on and on, it's been the discussion about the last mile.
Yeah.
You know, and that's really what it is. I mean,
Yeah.
you go, like with David, you know,
Right,
you go up
right.
Black Locust Road, at a certain point, it stops.
Yeah,
You know, I mean, I would have to guess, you know, Old Quarry Road, for example. I can't believe that they've run fiber out there, because there's
Right.
just not enough households.
yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong, but.
Of course,
I-
Forget about Turner Trail.
Well, Turner Trail, I mean, when you start
Yeah,
looking at how many there
I
are,
know,
teeny
yeah.
little arteries all
Yeah.
over the place.
Yeah,
And unless people are willing to pay to install the infrastructure,
Right.
do you guys have fiber all the way up to you?
We have high speed, but I don't know if it's fiber.
Yeah.
You know, but they put a whole corridor right through.
Right up through.
Right up
Yeah.
through. It ends about a mile from our house, but because it's within a mile, we
You-
get it.
So you probably get it through copper, which is.
Right,
But
right.
it,
That's
it's
what
not
I have from the pole to my shop, but at least to the pole. And it used to wait forever to get downloaded video.
Right,
or
exactly.
You know,
It's pretty fast
schematic
now.
or electrical
Yeah.
system, and now it's seconds.
but, yeah, I just wanted to bring
You
that
could
up.
just give Xfinity to your firstborn child and be all set.
could do that too.
Pretty much about how much they cost.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's amazing, you know, the cost per mile is just staggering.
Yeah.
And I think that's come down because fiber technology is better, but it's still, there's a lot of money.
Yeah.
All right, so
So the draft animal control ordinance,
we have a special ordinance for draft animals?
yeah.
Sorry, I couldn't
Draft
resist.
horses. So after going to my workshop today, you did review the draft. Did you have any questions?
I just have concerns about you being I mean, I understand that
Default
it's
person.
mandated, but I do have concerns about you and Tom being the default. I feel like you have way too much on your plates already, and,
But I think that's statutory, isn't it? That's
Yeah.
not us.
yeah, no,
Right.
that's not us.
So even if we didn't have an ordinance,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
would still be the case.
Yeah,
No,
I
but I
just-
totally agree. I think
Yeah.
it's,
But that was the only thing that really raised alarm bells for me when I was reading through it.
So I want to meet with the Animal Advisory Board. They've kind of just,
been quiet.
they've been very quiet. So, meet with them. We have to warn this as, you know, a public hearing
Right.
because it is an ordinance.
If we're gonna adopt an
Yeah.
ordinance, yeah.
So, 30-day notice in the paper. I learned all that today, by the way.
And this is all an important step in hopefully creating a relationship with
Right.
the sheriff's department.
Yeah, so we should have
Without an
something
ordinance, then-
anyways,
Right.
and if that happens, then we can, you know, massage it if we need to.
Yeah, no,
And then
I think we shouldn't underestimate at all the importance of what he was saying about 23 towns having 23 ordinances.
Right.
And we should be as receptive as we possibly can to having a generic ordinance that would
Universal.
fit as
Let's
many.
get the program running.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Right.
right.
I think that it would be better to try to have 3 or 4 towns that were the
Yeah,
same
start.
than to have everybody.
yeah.
Yeah, like-
Well, and honestly, again, this is where legislation could be helpful. I mean,
Right.
you know, if there was legislation that said, these are the basics of a town ordinance for animal control,
Yeah,
that would make life a lot easier. Because then they could base their service
Right.
on that.
Yeah.
And then if towns had quirky things about them, they'd
Right.
have to tweak it to it, pay a little
Yeah.
more, pay a little less, whatever, but,
and VLCT does have a model template,
yeah.
which we worked off of as well, to amend this one. But,
Right. But we're still on our own as far as,
We are, and they're, you know, this is a touchy topic,
oh, yeah,
animals.
yeah.
And, you know, there's a lot of different personalities on the board, and, it took a while to,
Not that
muddle
many people, but a
through.
lot of personalities.
Yeah, well, but they're all experienced,
I know, I
and
get
I'm
it.
like,
I
Not a lot of draft.
Just
you
tricky,
know,
yeah.
it's like, dogs are a big thing in
Oh,
Putney,
yeah.
and I'm like,
Dogs and beavers.
Yeah,
it's true, you can't forget the beaver.
yeah.
Now the turtles too.
Turtles too.
Yeah, but, so I'm
And not
glad
so
you
many
guys
dairy
looked at
cows.
that.
No.
So I'll get with Abby and schedule a meeting, and then,
Figure out when we're gonna post it for,
we'll
yeah.
post it. And I
Yeah.
think the timing is really good because town meeting's coming up too, so there might be discussion about this at town meeting. Okay?
Good.
Yeah. This,
All
did
right.
I have, oh, wait a minute, I just want to share with you guys quickly, okay? So, taxes.
Oh, so.
You saw these in your package, right?
Yeah, yeah.
By the way, that's $17,000 more, less.
Less, okay, for overall,
Yes, overall.
for payment one or payment two, don't matter.
It was a combination.
All
So
right,
overall, it's 17 plus thousand less than,
yeah,
because that's what I deposited today.
so yeah, payment one and two, $145,473.18, minus 17 grand.
Like 128.
So since he's up,
Oh, no,
No.
you were still
So-
reviewing taxes, yes.
Delinquent tax report, we're still out $92,441.15. I'm giving you guys these numbers for a reason. And then utility billing is $24,382.11. I'm still,
Delinquent.
yes, delinquent. And I'm still working on the landmark, which I will get a hold of John McLaren, who is on vacation right now. But if I don't get any more information, we will have to credit. And it appears that it's probably,
Water issue.
Yeah.
so that's that. Warrants, if you can move on to warrants, that's good.
Yes, we do.
I move to accept and execute the warrants as presented upon completion of review.
And I second that.
It's been moved and seconded to accept and execute the warrants as presented upon review. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Payroll warrant dated November 29th in the amount of $19,378.08.
That's a big one.
You have the library, you got rec department,
Are we doing bi-weekly now or not? I mean,
no,
semi-weekly?
They had a lot of calls, I think, at the fire station.
I think it was a really busy period for
Plus
them.
we paid out some people who finished training.
yeah, 3 people were paid a stipend.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Those are some real numbers.
right.
We'll be done in like an hour, so.
I bet.
If you stop talking
Keep
over
this
there,
room quiet.
right?
I'm working on overtime, it's okay.
Great. That's the kind of attitude we like.
I don't give her overtime.
Did you hear that? That's a
Do
big
I
one.
get a 3% increase on nothing?
Payroll warrant dated December 6, 2019, in the amount of $6,574.87.
Yeah, kid, stop.
Yeah.
We're almost done.
That's what you think.
There's no other business.
Don't make me go into executive session.
Only if you order pizza.
Alright. Accounts payable dated 11/23 through 12/6/2019. There is a payment to the school in here. $1,211,398.23. So that would be the second payment to the school. In our account right now, there's about 2.3. So, that being said, delinquent taxes and utility billing, we need to start collecting money.
These taxpayer payments, is that,
Those are credits.
okay?
It's overpayments.
Mm-hmm.
So their homestead exemption probably came in and, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
They'd already paid.
right.
Yeah, without the school payment, we were only like 51,000, so actual AP wasn't too bad.
Schools are expensive. And we only have one more to go.
Then it all starts over again.
Yeah,
It's gonna be less
Then it all
than
starts over
those.
again.
The illusion that there is night, right? There's no night.
I'm
Earth is
hoping
just
we
turning.
overpay and then we end up with credit, you know? That sometimes happens. We still don't have any draft audit yet.
What did we pay EJP this much for? Was that related to meters or not?
No, that's related to either water or sewer.
The auto read contract, right?
Oh, yeah, the handheld, the gun to
Yeah.
read the meters. Yeah, there's like a support, annual support.
And why are we paying Renault gravel or something?
Good question.
Ding, 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 you win the
I
prize.
questioned it too because,
Was it a final payment on something we hadn't
well,
settled up on?
so the date was August 1st, 2019, and the ship date was August 2nd, 2019, and I'm like, well, how can that be when our closing was August 1st to buy the pit? So, I called Renault and talked to Cindy, and the answer to your question is that it was material for the Houghton Brook culvert project. And the date of the slip was 8/1, but the product was received prior to that date. So basically, we're finishing out a grant with this material for the town.
Right. Okay.
But unfortunately, because this invoice came late, and there's another invoice from Mitchie for $9,400 that came late, they're not reimbursable through the grant. So these expenses will come out of the highway department budget.
Why would Mitchie have come through the?
Well, I called them too, and their invoice was dated 10/31, and I submitted,
But they wouldn't have been, oh, Mitchie for the construction of the culvert?
it was for engineering,
I was
okay?
thinking Mitchell
Yeah.
asphalt.
So I'm like, we submitted this grant on August 1st, and I said, you're just sending us an invoice, and I'm like, that can't happen.
Yeah.
So we have no recourse but to pay it. We can't get reimbursed, it's too late. So
That's frustrating.
it's very frustrating, and
So I guess the lesson in that
Yeah.
is that doing due diligence to make sure we're settled up with everybody before we
well, I had,
close the grant. I'm not
I
faulting you
had
for that, I'm
asked the
just saying,
question,
yeah.
but next year it won't
I
happen.
think there needs
Yeah.
to be like a Brian says, I ordered this, this is
Exactly,
what.
some sort
that
of
way, when
accounting
we
of
pick,
it,
like-
right.
Yeah.
What hasn't been paid and
Yeah.
how much is it gonna be,
Yeah.
and,
And
yeah.
I don't think there is that right now.
Can
You
you,
need a checklist for every project.
Yeah. Like,
well,
who is going to be submitting invoices to you,
Yeah.
and have we gotten them yet?
Yeah.
Right, which we,
Brian's pretty
we
good
know,
about it.
yeah.
I don't know
It's the
why
timing of the
this one-
invoices, but it's
Yeah.
unfortunate that the grant, just the way that cycle works,
Yeah.
that's the way it is.
So that Mitchie check, I don't mail that. I want us to send a letter with that check.
It's in there, it's this time, it wasn't last
A letter
time?
of objection.
Yeah, I'm gonna contest it,
Yeah.
but I wanna contest it to the right person, not the project engineer.
Right.
Cause I want it to be known that this should
Was
have never
unacceptable.
happened.
Yeah.
It is unacceptable.
Yeah.
So,
Well, that's like 3 months later.
yeah.
Do it if we don't pay it.
And that was for services that were done
Hey.
3 months
early,
before that.
early.
Yeah,
That was
at
for the
least.
design
Yeah,
of
so that was way
the
back.
box core.
Is there no time limitation on submitting an invoice?
Probably not,
No.
or not. There probably is, but it's probably
But Renault's is the
18
same.
months or, yeah.
Renault's is the same. That should never happen. But, there's verbal agreements, I get it, and it's just like, but,
Yeah, right, but again, the sort of the, what do we learn from that is.
well, what I've learned from it is I'm not gonna hurry up and close a grant.
Exactly.
I'm gonna keep it open for a couple months.
Or at least
Make sure
do
that-
what you need to make
Yeah.
sure, I mean,
Right.
those were probably things, had you been aware of them and thought
Right.
about it, you
Right.
could have easily tracked them down, you just didn't know you had to.
Yeah, but I would have never known that. and
Right.
Brian would have had to tell me that,
Does he
Right.
review a grant before you close it out?
Yes.
Does he review the
Yeah, yeah,
So
I
it's just-
showed
It's just
him,
gotten
the
this.
slip?
yep,
No, and there were probably already, I mean, I'm sure there were payments to Mitchie in there and so on, so.
yes,
you
because
know,
we had to have it down like a
So
deposit.
you see Mitchie's name in
Yeah,
it.
exactly, say, okay, we'll
Yeah.
pay, yeah.
So unfortunately, that's, $12,000 like that.
Yeah.
So if they would, there's the money piece again,
Yeah. All right, do we have any other business?
No,
And we don't need an executive session.
why not?
Well, we can. Did you make your call? You got 2 minutes.
I was joking. I'm not gonna. I ate before I came tonight. I figured tonight was gonna take forever.
No, I'm good.
Our next meeting date is December 18th.
Yeah, I don't think we need to have one prior to
Between.
that.
Okay. You don't think so? I don't think so.
No, I think we're good.
Okay, good. And then if there's a motion to adjourn,
So moved.
Seconded.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.